Hello everyone. We're about to get started here. I want to check something, which of course I should have had ready before we started, but I wasn't ready. So give me a second here. Hi James, you're the first. So, nope, Jeff, James beat you to it. Sorry, Callie. You guys are funny. All right, let me check something. I'm trying to find out a factoid really fast. Let's see. Okay, I think I have my facts straight. So I'm going to close this. I'm hating the tank behind me. Hating it, hating it, hating it. So I'm going to turn all these off. Okay, maybe I can tolerate that better. I'll move this over so I can see you guys. And I wanted to say welcome to the 111th live stream that we've had on this channel. The YouTube channel has over 300 videos, and I'm sure the live streams are a big part of it. But yeah, anyway, I just wanted to let you guys know that. It's kind of interesting to keep track of those numbers and see where we're at and what's going on. So I tried something different today, thinking maybe the tank would look better, but you know, the webcam never captures it right. As you guys saw in this 6-year anniversary video, the Reef is beautiful, but on the live stream, I always hate the look, and you know, you guys are like, oh, we like it, but I don't. So I tried hanging some fabric behind the tank to kind of get rid of the background, and then I tried moving the light rack back. The only thing I haven't done was switch the XHO from my Refugium because I don't want to disconnect it just to plug it in on top. Even though it really would be a one-time test. Even that one time is a pain in the butt for me. So maybe next weekend I'll do that, and we can just see how that looks. And then if it works, maybe I'll just order a new XHO specifically for the live stream that will make the tank look decent-ish. But I tried it with 10K lighting, I tried it with 20K lighting, which you just saw me turn off, and here we are. Okay, so the biggest news story of the week is me telling all of you guys that the Trident saved my Reef. I did a blog about this on my website a couple days ago in case you want to read it, but I'll just catch up. Every Saturday is Water Test Saturday, and every Saturday I tell you, please test your water. Don't blow it off. Don't say I'll do it later. Don't say my tank looks fine. Don't tell me I don't have that test kit. Go buy it. Test your water. So I do. I test my water every Saturday like clockwork because it's the right thing to do. It's so you know what's going on with your tank. And somehow from that Saturday, where the Trident said that my alkalinity was at I think it was 9.3, and my test kit said 9.0, so I'm like, all right, we're good. Well, on Tuesday morning, my alkalinity just started dropping like a rock. And by Thursday morning, I noticed, and because I happened to look at the graph in Apex Fusion, and it showed that my alkalinity was 7. Coincidentally, which wasn't a coincidence at all, I had a couple of my SPS corals RTN overnight and turned bone white. You know, it wasn't a huge widespread problem, but whenever you see a sudden 2-inch area of white in your tank, you get a little nervous. You're like, what happened? What's going on? So behind me is, on this side, is a small little Acropora that I got from Dwayne, and I guess my fish broke it in half because they were trying to catch the food. And that piece that broke off was lying next to the, let's call it the parent colony, even though it was really split 50-50. And it was alive and well. And then when it suddenly died, but the one connected to the rock didn't, I thought, well, that's weird. What would cause that to die? And then I looked in that Acropora up there, and there was some white death in there. And I noticed a little tip on another one, and I thought, ugh, what is going on? And, you know, I knew my alkalinity was 9 as of last Saturday, so there's no way that's the problem. But then Fusion and the Trident proved me that there was a problem, and so the first thing I did was I ran to my tank and I checked the CO2 tank because the CO2 tank provides gas for the calcium reactor, which melts the media, which provides my regular dose of alkalinity to the tank at all times. And the tank was empty, so I just switched out tanks and reconnected it. And then I thought, well, okay, I've solved one problem, but the alkalinity is still low on my tank. So I went to the Reef chemistry calculator, which is online. The one I prefer to use is the one that was written by J. Dieck, and that's J-D-I-E-C-K. J-D-I-E-C-K, J. Dieck. And he and I go way back, a long, long time ago. He was just one of those chemistry gurus. And he worked a lot with Randy Holmes Farley, so I respect both of them. And when he came up with this calculator, a lot of us were like, thank you so much. Because you could go into the Reef chemistry calculator, you can put in your total water volume, your current parameter of either alkalinity, calcium, or magnesium. And then you can go ahead and put in what you want it to be, and then it'll calculate how much you need of each of those doses to, you just test one at a time. And so I went through the alkalinity one very quickly, and it showed that I needed 14 teaspoons of baked baking soda, or what we call soda ash, in my tank. And I thought, well, that's a lot. I'm not going to take that chance. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mix up 6 teaspoons of the 14 in a cup of water, set on top of the tank. Like I did a really short video, like 1 minute long, sometime last year, and it just trickles in the tank. It just pees into the tank and just adds the alkalinity of whatever that is. It's a red Solo cup. How much do those things hold? 16 ounces? So let's pretend those 12 ounces of water, 6 teaspoons of soda ash, and that just peed in the tank. And the warning on the Reef chemistry calculator said don't go more than 0.2 up on your pH. So I watched the pH carefully. And I was at 8.03. And after the first cup was in the tank, I was at 8.14. And I thought, I barely went up 0.1, so I don't have to worry. I'm going to go ahead and mix up another 6 teaspoons. And I stir that in. I let it settle. Then I poured it in the cup, and I let it pee in the tank again. And I watched, and the pH was up to like 8.17. It still wasn't, I didn't hit the 2 that it was warning about. And I thought, well, apparently I can put in all 14 teaspoons. So I put in the last 2 teaspoons, and then I called it a night. I fixed the calcium reactor situation, and I'd already dosed my tank to get the alkalinity back where it wanted to be. I don't want to stop here, because some people might say, why would you bring it up so quickly? And the reason being is that it wasn't a huge difference. Normally the tank is at 9 to 9.3 all the time. And for it to dip to 7, and it literally just went downhill, and there's a graph on my blog. It just went downhill so rapidly, I thought what I need to do is get it back up where it belongs immediately, and that's what I chose to do. And so then 6 hours later, the Trident took a measurement, and I think it said my alkalinity was at 8.8. And then at noon, another 6 hours later, I was back to 9.03, which was very close. And now I'm right about 9.25. So basically, my tank was saved by the Trident because it caught this, which I would not have caught. If you're testing your water once a week, I mean, look what happened here. I test on Saturday, and on Tuesday something happened, the middle of the 2 Saturdays. And, I'm really glad that I was able to catch it. But I know not everyone has a Trident, but I just want to emphasize why it's beneficial to you. And, if you feel that, this is the way you want to go, then do it. If you prefer, and I know one guy in our Club Milo's Reef, he actually tests his alkalinity every single day with a test kit. And so he would stay on top of this. I also, when I shared this in the Neptune group on Facebook, I told him what was happening, and several of them said, why don't you have any alarms set up? Which I was like, yes, I definitely need to do that. However, when your alkalinity is lower than your target rate, adding the alarm code at that point is pointless because the alarm's going to go off as soon as you hit submit. So I had to wait until alkalinity was back up where it belonged, and then I put in my alarm code to warn me. Another thing that several people said is, well, why weren't you measuring the pH in the calcium reactor? Well, I have a pH controller, and so it measures, but I don't have a pH probe connected to the apex on the calcium reactor where it could tell me that the pH level was out of range inside the reactor. So I guess I'm going to have to bite the bullet and install some more parts and kind of make that a little bit more bulletproof. Anyway, the point is, the Reef is fine. Nothing bad happened. The little bit I lost, so be it. It's a huge tank. There's a lot going on in there. It wasn't a huge setback. It was like a minor little hiccup of death. And, the top-down view is not as pretty right now on this end of the tank specifically. And I kind of just want to go in there and trim away with some bone cutters. But I just want to kind of go through that process with you, the process of the thinking behind how you handle the situation when things go awry, because it really depends on the circumstances. Like, I always have alkalinity issues, and the Trident has really leveled that off. But a couple of years ago, and then again like a year ago before the Trident, my reef had gotten up to a crazy high number, and because I wasn't checking my tests. I wasn't testing weekly like I kept saying we need to do. And it was one of the reasons, that was what spurred me into actually asking you guys to test, was to remind myself to test. And so I was lax on measuring the alkalinity, and I turned around and one day I was like, all right, let me test everything. And I pulled out all my test kits, I measured everything, and the tank was 22 DKH, which is crazy high. And I looked at the reef and I looked at the fish and I thought, that's so strange. I've mentioned this before, some of you guys have heard it. But I thought, wow, that's crazy. Well, I can't go from 22 back down to 9 really fast. That would be a disaster. It would have killed everything. I knew that. That was a given. So instead, what I did was I brought it down to 16, and I let it sit there for about 3 weeks. And then I brought it down to 12, and I let it sit there for about 3 weeks. And then I brought it back down to 9 and kept it there. So it took, whatever that is, 2 months of time, basically, to bring the alkalinity down to a normal level without shocking the corals. But going from 7 to 9 wasn't a big jump, and so I was like, I'm bringing it right back up where it belongs immediately. And the reef responded accordingly. It went well. I didn't have anything weird. The anemones didn't split. I don't have any more death in the tank. The fish are okay. They're a little annoyed with me right now because I have the cloth on the back. Because they hate that. I remember, side story, my friend Gary Parr came over once. He wanted to photograph some corals in my tank, and he said, I just want to come there, because he takes beautiful pictures. And so he brought some black velour fabric to hang on the back of the tank, and we connected it across there. And Spock was so mad at this cloth. I mean, she was furious. She was like, what is that? How dare you get away from my reef? And she didn't really calm down. And she was happy the moment we took the cloth down. So, our fish do have personalities, and they have the right to be upset if things have been changed from what they are used to. So that was the big newsy story I wanted to share with you this week. There's another little tidbit that I don't know if you saw the announcement via Facebook or Reef Builders, is that the Indonesian coral trade is about to resume, and they're going to be bringing in aquacultured corals or maricultured corals. I always get those two mixed up, but they're growing these corals, and they've been growing them, and they're going to be allowed to export those. That basically means they're not going to be exporting wild corals from the ocean. So it's still exciting, because these were corals at some point must have been harvested from the ocean, brought on land, grown out in the lagoons, or where there's water, or they have troughs on land where they do it. But even if they're on land, they can pipe the water from the ocean straight in and out, which is much nicer than what we have. And so that is something that a lot of people have been excited about. Some people are concerned. There's kind of a debate on what the pricing of corals will be. Will it affect coral pricing and bring it down? Will it be just as high? Will they charge more because they're trying to recoup all the losses they've suffered for so long? We don't know. We really don't. And, coral prices are coral prices. And usually I just look at it like, can I afford it? Yes, no. And that's the end of the conversation. Just like you would do with almost anything in life. So will we see Australian pricing coming down now that Indonesia's open? I don't know. And really, it doesn't really matter. There's so many corals and so many hobbyist tanks. If you go to frag swaps, if you go to the trade shows, you have an opportunity to buy a lot of gorgeous things, and save up your money. Save your loose change and throw it in a jar and keep collecting it. And then when it's time for the frag swap, you might have 80 or 100 bucks worth of extra money to spend on a coral, which I know is, with some, that's only a piece of one coral. But still, I mean, you didn't know you had 80 or $100 in coins sitting. Mine's by the front door. So last week we had a super long live stream, and it wasn't intentional at all. None of it was intentional. However, when we finally got done, I thought, well, that was a lot of fun, and that was crazy long, and I'll never do that again. And I went ahead and I tested my water in my tank, and I made some dinner, and I cleaned some stuff up. And then I was joking with a moderator saying, hey, who's ready for part 2 after that marathon? Knowing they would be like, haha, that's funny. Yeah, you're a good guy. And they were like, we double dog dare you. So they pressured me. It was total peer pressure. And we did more live stream that night. I think we started at like 11 o'clock at night. And about 200 people immediately jumped on and were super excited to be part of that live stream. So that was funny. It was fun. And one person's comment caught my eye. He said, I watched both streams and I have to say, I like Champagne Mark better than Coffee Mark. I just love that. That was great. I can't be drinking champagne middle of the day. I got things to do when I turn off the stream. But that was great. But we did have a lot of fun. There will be some type of marathon stream in the future. I don't know when, but we'll try to give you notice. We've kind of come up with, the moderators are always suggesting things to me, and they came up with kind of a cool idea, a concept that might work, but I got to test it out first and see if I can even do it right. But if we can do it right, that would be a really fun thing to do. But I know a lot of people want short videos, and you guys love long videos. I hear it all the time. And so I really don't care about the clock. You know, when I do the video about the anniversary of my tank, I think it was 31 minutes long or something. I was like, okay, whatever, it's 13 gigs. I don't care, I'll upload it. And I'm like, 30 minutes is nice. I know some people want to learn something in 2 minutes. I get that. I do it too. And so if you can jump on YouTube and find a quick tutorial that takes you exactly to the 13 seconds you need to know, and you can book out of there, yeah, that makes sense. But at the same time, there is information that sometimes is gleaned through conversation and storytelling that you're like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. So that is, you know, that was just a lark. Don't count on 6-hour streams. One person wrote me on, I think it was Monday, and she said, I've spent the last 3 days trying to watch both streams. It was so fun. All right. So, you know, it's funny, when I start these streams, the title that I used for the stream itself evaporates. It just goes right off screen. I don't even get to see what it said. What does this thing do? Nope, that doesn't do it. Wait, what is that? Oh, I see what that is. That's no good. Okay. I did mention RTN, which is part of the whole thing with alkalinity, so I covered that. I wanted to talk about a couple more things, but let me jump into something kind of short and quick, because the conversation comes up a lot. And that is cleaning your aquarium gear with white vinegar. That has been a staple, it's been a standard, it's been going on forever. And lately, anytime someone says, I want to clean my gear, people say white vinegar, and then, I don't know, let's just say 3 people just seem to watch everywhere for any discussion and like, no, don't use vinegar. It's okay. You can use white vinegar. If you can get your hands on it, great. It's fine. You don't want anything with flavors or coloration or anything like that. Just plain white vinegar. You can buy a 1-gallon bottle at the supermarket for about $2. Walmart sells it. Home Depot probably sells it in jugs for all I know. White vinegar is an excellent cleaner. It's a weak acid, and it will clean your gear. The concern or the accusation that's been is that certain plastics don't handle the vinegar, which is weird to me. There's been posts, lots of them, you know, on the web where people are like, oh, look, it destroyed my magnet, which I just don't believe, because I haven't destroyed magnets in vinegar. And I mean, look, you guys know how busy I am. I keep telling you I am. I must actually be it. I can't be lying about this, right? There are times where I take a Vortex inside, you know, the wet side that was inside the tank, and I put it in what looks like a 1-gallon pitcher. It's just, you know, like to pour iced tea. And I pour in pure vinegar, and I ignore it for weeks. It just sits in there. And then eventually, God, you got to clean that thing, Mark. You need, what are you doing? And so I would finally remove the thing out of there. I'd take it apart and clean it. Everything was fine, and I put it together. The worst thing I've seen happen with white vinegar, personally, is the O-ring inside my Vortex gets bigger. And so then you can't put it together until it kind of, I don't know, dries out on the counter for a couple days. Then the rubber retracts. I can slide it into its groove. I can put it together, and it's ready to go. But that being said, I just want to tell you, don't fear white vinegar. Don't let people tell you it's so evil. If you, and I told you, I just used it 100%, left it for weeks. But fine. Let's just say that's bad. 50-50 is a great way to clean your equipment, and you can just let it soak overnight. Ideally, I always recommend let it soak while it's running if you can do that. If it's like a small pump of some kind, and you can put it in a bucket or a barrel, just plug it in. Let the white vinegar solution just go through all the parts while it's running rather than just sitting there on it. I feel like that helps the cleaning process a little bit more. But that being said, I wanted to talk about citric acid because that is something that has been mentioned in the past, and I finally investigated it, and I wanted to discuss it. So I went ahead and I just grabbed some from Amazon. This is citric acid. That's the brand, Milliard, I guess you should say. And it's just a white powder. And this stuff here, I think this was a 5-pound bag. I don't even know what I paid. I just told Amazon to send it to me. Maybe it's 11 bucks. I don't know. Maybe it was less. And then I had to clean my 2 skimmers. So I cleaned the protein skimmer that was under the Reef, and I got that scrub clean, and it looked beautiful, and people on Instagram were like, wow, that looks brand new. This is the other Nano skimmer. I cleaned this in the same solution, and it's all cleaned up. It looks really good, and that was using citric acid. Now, the hardest part to clean on the Nanos is always this tube, because they don't let you take it apart. But overall, it's really nice. It's ready to go. It's going back under the frag tank system, or in that sump, when I finish cleaning that sump. Told you I'm trying to work on the reset. But if you want to use citric acid, people say, well, how much? So from what I understood, and if I'm wrong, somebody can put in the comments, I was told that you want to use 1 cup per gallon. So in my trough, I had 6 gallons of water dumped in there, and I put in 4 cups. Did the job. So, and I still have a lot left. I don't think I used, maybe I used 1/3 of a bag, but I did multiple projects. I cleaned a bunch of Vortex, I cleaned 2 skimmers, I got a lot of stuff cleaned. So you should be able to do the same, and I think you'll be happy with it, and there's no smell. It didn't burn my skin at all. It was easy to dispose of. You didn't have to worry about it like you do with muriatic acid. I mean, to me, it's just like dumping out vinegar, so that was that. Now, the next topic I wanted to discuss, and then I've got something that I want to show you as well. So let me get that organized. I did do all my water tests, so I might as well distract you with that for a moment. So let's see, what else do I have here? Oh, there we go. And this, and this, this, and this, and this. This, and this. All right, where's my option? I guess they moved it on the iPhone. Add to album, that's what I was looking for. New album. All right, just wanted to have that ready for you guys. I want to talk about the lighting schedule, because when it comes to lighting, it's so important that you handle it correctly. And I feel like a lot of people they're not familiar with how it's supposed to be. I can't get the lighting right on this thing. I can't stand it. All right. When it comes to lighting your reef tank versus a fish-only system, or even a non-photosynthetic tank, lighting varies from tank to tank to tank. But overall, if you're trying to grow soft corals, if you're trying to grow LPS corals, if you're trying to grow SPS corals, you're going to need a certain amount of light for those different species. And it kind of goes from low light for soft corals all the way up to the most intense light for SPS corals. That's the general rule. And that's why in a reef tank, you'll see SPS up high, you'll see LPS lower, and then you'll see soft corals way down on the sand. And that is because the light is intense at the top, and it becomes weaker as it comes down, and then it goes to the weakest point. Now, when you are lighting your tank, a lot of lights come with a default factory setting schedule. And a lot of them seem to be 12 hours. And I don't know why they do that. As a matter of fact, they do it from 9 to 9, which makes no sense either, because if you're a morning riser going to work, it comes on at 9, you've already left, so you missed it, right? You needed to be on at 7 in the morning while you're getting your kids ready for school or whatever you're going to do, make your coffee and sip your, have some breakfast, and then you take off for work. But then it's off at 9, which is too early because you didn't get to really appreciate your tank, because by the time you got home from work, let's say you're home at 6:30, you got like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and your tank is turned off, so that's no fun. So that 12-hour window makes no sense to me. I would like to ask you or encourage you to forget 12 hours, because that's not how it is in reality. The light that's outside, that travels over our globe, is not a 12-hour day. And we have the shortest day of the year, and we have the longest day of the year. But what really matters is what I like to call high noon. And high noon is when the sun is directly overhead and it's blasting you with sunlight, and it's when the corals get the most out of the lighting. And high noon doesn't last 12 hours. It doesn't last 8 hours. It doesn't last 6 hours. It's high noon. It's a peak of a couple of hours, from, let's call it 11 to 1. That's when you're really hitting the area with a lot of light, and then the sun keeps traveling and you get less light, and it works its way further down through the atmosphere and even less light, and then it becomes orange and it's pretty and it's gone. So the first thing you want to say is, well, what time should my high noon be on my tank? For mine, high noon is from 3 to 7. 3 in the afternoon to 7 p.m. That's my high noon. Everything before that is ramp up, and then everything after that is ramp down. But everything on all at the same time happens from 3 to 7 o'clock. That's 4 hours. Now, because of the way I run my lights, I extend my photo period to a longer day. I don't expect you to copy what I do in that regard, because I choose to do something called staggered lighting, and I have an article about that I can put in the link in the description of this video. But the staggered lighting was a way to have one light turn on, and then you wait an hour and a half, and the next light turns on, and you wait another hour and a half, and the next light turns on, and it's like the light moved across the reef. And I love doing that, and I've been doing it for a decade. But most people just want the lights on. They don't want to have part of the tank dark and part of it lit, and I understand that. I get it. We all have different tastes, right? But I'd like you to find your high noon, what's the peak of the day for your tank that's ideal for you, and then you can add light before and after, which would be a lesser percentage. Now, if you have a fish-only tank, odds are you don't have really good lighting. You just have some decent lights, enough to see and feed the tank and make it look decent. And that one, the photo period doesn't really matter that much, but I still would recommend you have it around 9 hours a day total. And with 9 hours a day, that's enough light for the animal to kind of experience a day with you. It gives you a time period to enjoy it, it gives you a time period to feed it, and then it gives it a rest period, which is fine because everything needs to rest and you don't want to grow nuisance algae in your tank. If you run a longer light period, you're feeding the algae. So we want to reduce that. And in a fish-only system, the lights may be so dim, just like the most basic of LED lighting, that maybe you won't grow algae and you can run it longer. But if you're dealing with algae issues, you need to reduce that lighting period to a shorter period. So I suggest 9 hours a day. So like from 1 p.m. to 10 p.m. is 9 hours, right? And you don't need to be on in the morning. You don't need to be on while you're at work for part of your day. Have it come on in the middle of the afternoon and swing around to the night. California's electric rates are so high that those people choose to run their lights from 6 p.m. till 2, 3 in the morning because the electricity is cheaper at night. And that actually works great with my schedule. But fortunately, I don't have to do that here in Texas. I can have my lights come on. But, if you are trying to get rid of algae, a lot of people say turn off your lights. And they'll even say put a blanket around the tank or black it out with plastic bags, and they really seal it like a coffin, which stops every kind of light possible, even ambient light. And ambient light isn't a problem for your reef. Ambient light does not grow algae. Direct sunlight shining through the window into your tank, that can grow some algae, but then just put some curtains on the window or a mini blind, something to stop that sunlight from hitting your tank. But just some light coming into the room should not grow algae in your tank, other than film algae on the glass. But you're not going to see hair algae bursting off your rocks because of some ambient light in the room. It's always going to come from our super intense lighting that we put on our aquariums. So when you're trying to fight something like cyano, the simplest bet is just turn off your lights. Unplug the timers or unplug the lights from the timer so the timers don't lose their settings, and just appreciate that your tank needs 3 days of break. And then what'll happen is the cyanobacteria that's starving for light will just wither away. And I did that only once. One time in my career of running a reef tank, I chose to not be scared and just turn off these lights and see what happens. And when I did it, I was amazed at the results. It was fantastic. I lost a few coral fragments, which I was like, okay, well, cost of doing business, so to speak. You know, I got rid of the cyano, but I lost a few little frags. So be it. But the coolest thing was every inch of my glass was pristine clean, and my skimmer pulled out the thickest, ugliest sludge ever on day 4. Each day it pulled out some skimmate, and it was obviously the cyano was dying, and it was exporting that and some of the algae that went with it, and it just got worse and worse. But then my tank was crystal clear, my skimmer was full of crap, my glass was clean. I was like, that was fantastic. I'm never doing that again. So, you know, if you want to try it, you know, yeah, you can do it, and if you lose a few corals, don't be upset, because it can happen because they didn't get any light that they're used to getting for 3 days straight, which is a long time for some SPS corals, and it can be a little nerve-wracking as a hobbyist to do that. If you are really suffering from algae problems, reducing the lighting period to a couple hours a day will still give you a little bit of time to look at the tank. It'll allow the fish to swim around in light so they can see the food you're feeding. And it won't fuel the algae growth because it's too short. Most of the algae problems we have these days are going to be like hair algae, bryopsis, valonia, and all 3 of those can be removed with Flux RX, which is a Blue Life USA product. I carry it in my shop. I should put that on the screen, right? All right, shameless plug. Shameless plug time. Flux RX works really well. I'm getting lots of good responses from a lot of customers that are really appreciating it. They are able to use, and it comes in 3 sizes. The box is the same. I have to look really careful at the box before I ship it. But there's one for a 100-gallon tank, there's one for a 200-gallon tank, and there's one for 400 gallons. And it's just, I opened each box to verify, and each one has more of the powder. And fluconazole is the actual medicine, and it's for yeast infections or something. Now, it came in tablets, and people had to pull them apart and shake them out one at a time, which is a real pain. This, you don't have to do that. It comes with a spoon to scoop, and you can just measure it out and make your solution, put it in the tank. So that gets rid of hair algae and bryopsis really nicely. And if you use it at triple strength, it gets rid of valonia too, which is bubble algae. So that takes care of the algae problem. The second thing I always tell people to get rid of algae is to get rid of your phosphates. And I always use Phosphate RX. And that is the stuff I've been promoting for, I don't know, now I guess 11 years, now that it's 2020. I still love that stuff. Oh, let me talk about that. Oh, that's a good one. All right. So anyway, buy stuff from my shop. Let me tell you about Phosphate RX. Last Saturday, I held up my measurements like this. I went like this, don't look. That's what I said. I went, don't look. And I'm sorry, you can't see it. This is actually today's. So there's my numbers for today. Now, the reason I said don't look is because my phosphates were 1.0, which was a lot. And I tested them, I was like, really? So I was like, fine, I'll dose Phosphate RX. And then I thought, well, you know, 1.0 is pretty high. I'm not going to dose the full strength to knock it down. I'm going to dose a little bit each day for a few days. And so I dosed 100 drops. My tank is 450 gallons. Let me do the math really quick because I don't remember it by heart. Let's see. Okay, so to lower my phosphates 0.5, to cut the phosphate from 1.0 to 0.5 ppm would have taken 270 drops to knock it down. And then I'd have to do 270 drops again a couple days later to get all the way down to almost 0. But I thought, let me approach that one slower. So unlike the alkalinity story earlier where I knocked it out, this time I chose to be a little more cautious, and I think one of the reasons I was being cautious is because I saw the white stuff appear in my corals and got nervous. So I put in 100 drops each night. And I just put it right in the skimmer section. I didn't run a filter sock. I just let the protein skimmer catch it. I put it in around, I don't know, 1 in the morning. The house was pitch dark. I had to work with a little tiny light over the sump and just get my drops in there and not disturb the fish so they can sleep. And then each day the phosphates came down and came down and came down. And as of now, they're 0.05. So that worked great. I think I dosed it for 4 days in a row at 100 drops a day. And the fish didn't suffer at all. Now, interestingly, someone just posted on my lanthanum chloride video here on YouTube how he used Phosphate RX and he had 3 yellow tangs and they all died. which I still don't understand why yellow tangs die with Phosphate RX, because I have 2 yellow tangs in my Reef, and they've been through Phosphate RX so many times. I would love to figure out, I would love to know the catalyst, the thing that is different, that tank A does not kill a yellow tang and tank B does when it comes to Phosphate RX. Because it's not guaranteed to kill your fish. Just like, I mean, any kind of lanthanum product. There's a chance it can kill yellow tangs. But we don't, I want to know what is in their tank that made it happen versus so many tanks that used it and it didn't happen. I hope we can figure it out one day, because then if we know exactly what the catalyst is, we can say, well, make sure you do this. The one piece of advice that's always been given is to raise your alkalinity slightly before you dose. Maybe their alkalinity is so low in the first place that the Phosphate RX in their tank is causing these yellow tangs to die. I don't know. I feel bad for the guy, but he was really happy his phosphates were down and all his other fish were fine, so he was just like, I just want to report it. And, you know, I'm glad he did, but at the same time, I'm sad it happened. And, you know, obviously we care about every fish in our tank, and they're not disposable. So it would be really nice if we could isolate it down to, it always happens in an all-in-one tank, or it always happens if you're running GFO at the same time, or it always happens, you know, I wish we could figure out the secondary thing that somehow the two connect, and that's what's causing it, so we can avoid it and, you know, find a workaround. Like the guy even said, in the future, if when I dose it again, I'll dose at a lesser strength. Maybe he overdosed. I don't know. But he's not the only one. It's happened to some people. But most people it doesn't happen to, and I love the stuff. So, and like I said, my yellow tangs, I've had them for 6 years now, and that means they've been through it at least 30, 40 times. And, you know, there's one right there, and there's one right there. See, they're kind of hiding because that fabric on the back. They're confused. All right, so I use Phosphate RX to knock down the phosphate in the water. When you drip it in the tank, if the tank turns cloudy, there actually is phosphate. So all of you guys with HANA checkers that are parts per billion and you say it's super duper low, if you're growing algae in your tank, you have algae in your tank, you have phosphate in your water. So your test is not telling you the truth. And the easiest way to verify is rip out a bunch of algae by hand and then measure your phosphate again, and you'll probably have a higher number. But using Phosphate RX in the tank will create a cloud. The cloud proves there was phosphate present because it turned it into a solid and became a flocculant. And then it's exported. And if you can remove the phosphate and you reduce the lighting period, your algae will get under control. Then you manually start removing the big stuff that's hideous, you know, that you can really grab. And then whatever you can't quite reach, that's when you throw in your cleanup crew. And the cleanup crew will go in there and they'll eat what's left and keep it clean. And in my tank, you very rarely, even with the close-ups, you very rarely see any kind of algae in here. They're on the tip of this Shadowcaster coral. That branch there and the one behind it, on the part that faces the power head, there's a little bit of furry green. I'm just going to cut that top 1.5 inches off and throw it out and solve that. Rather than asking the coral to try and heal over all of that again, it's like, forget it. It'll grow a new tip quicker than it would to try and regrow over an area that used to be covered in algae. I think that's pretty much when I want to talk about the lighting period. I understand the desire to run them longer, but why not just start them later in the day so they run long enough for your, for your preferred time period? And if you run them super dim for a long part of the day, that probably won't be any problem for your tank at all. But the ones that have the lights come on, let's say they're at 0%, and then they go to, I don't know, 55%. They kind of go just straight across for 9.5 hours, 10 hours, and they finally just drop back down to a super low number. That's not the schedule I recommend. I much more prefer to see you do like a radiant schedule, like that's one of the default ones that Ecotech offers, where it's like a bell curve and it kind of goes up and up and up and across and down and down and back down to nothing. And you just reduce that photo period to a shorter period and it's perfect. So if you can avoid the 12-hour default that some companies seem to be recommending, and you shift the period to the later part of the day so you can appreciate it late into the evening, that would be great. And also, remember your tank does need to have total darkness to rest. Don't run moonlights nonstop, especially while you're asleep. What's the point? Who's looking at the tank? So have your moonlights on for an hour or two if you like that, and then just have them turn off. And just plug them into a timer, use your controller and say turn off. And that way, when you're sleeping, the fish are sleeping, the corals are resting, and they get ready for the new day. So that kind of covers all of that. And that's pretty much what I want to talk about today. We are not doing a 4-hour stream. All right, so, and then I finally want to show you something, which I told you. This is my last tidbit, and then we just go into your Q&A, so you can start asking your questions now. Let's see if this works. I want to make sure it works before I put it on screen. So this week, I worked on a big sump for a customer who's local. And this is a sump that's 72 inches long and 19 inches wide and 16 inches tall. It's made of 3/8 cast acrylic. And a lot of you guys have smaller tanks, and so you don't usually deal with big sumps. But this one here took up my entire work table. It was the full length. I mean, my table's like 74 inches long, and this sump was 72. And when I have to build bigger sumps, I have to actually put down a couple of sheets of MDF on the floor to build the sump and walk around it. This one here, everything is made of cast acrylic, 3/8, rather than any thin parts. I just want everything to be beefy and strong. I want this to last him 10, 12, 15 years. The top piece is pretty simple. There are holes for the bulkheads that are embedded in it, and the rest of it is just for strength. I really prefer sumps that have that top rim on them to keep the salt creep inside and keep the spatter off of the interior of your cabinet under the tank. So you can kind of see it from different angles. I did put a cross brace on this one just because I could. It wasn't necessary because the baffle is so tall that it holds the sump together. But the cross brace looked good, and it's directly over the teeth, which is an area where you can clean on either side with no problem, but it won't be in your way. I wouldn't put a cross brace over the triple baffles because if you did that, then you can't clean between the baffles. This is just a kind of a sense of scale to show you how big it was. And trust me, hauling that in and out of my house was not easy. I used a two-wheeler with huge tires, so it's kind of a soft ride. And then here it is. I was working on it. I just peeled off all the paper. I kind of thought about setting up a camera to show me peeling off paper, but you know what peeling off paper looks like, so I didn't do it. And then here I'm gluing in the sock holder he asked for. He doesn't plan to run socks, but he said if I wanted to, I want the ability. So I installed these brackets specifically directly under the bulkheads where it could drain right into socks. But his plan is to just have his drains come down with the bean animal style, I believe. And one drain will be a full siphon, one will be a Durso, and then one's the emergency drain, which is not that third one, by the way. So those two drains, one would go straight into the skimmer section, one would go into a Clarisy, the third one is actually the little one, that's for his chiller. And then the other end is, in the middle of the sump is a bulkhead all by itself, that's the emergency drain that would just spatter down into the return zone and be noisy intentionally to tell you there's a problem with the other plumbing. And then one on the far left is the bulkhead going into the refugium. And then I had to build some stands that were going to go under the skimmer and under the Clarisy. And then this is kind of the final product. And then I shared this video, which I guess I'll just let it play right now. Hopefully Aaron won't keep texting me while we're talking. So the sump came out really nice. The customer picked it up last night. Despite our storm that happened here, we actually were under a tornado warning, and a lot of people were really overly worried about what was going to happen. I don't know if the audio is coming through. Maybe I should shut up. Oh, there's no audio. I just saw in there it says Mark's 11 Pro muted. I'm like, I thought maybe I was talking over myself and I didn't want to do that. All right, so that's that. I just wanted to show that to you guys. It came out really, really nice. And some people say, what did that sump cost? It was $1,300 for that one. So it's expensive, but it's going to last them a long time. And it was going under a 240-gallon tank. So if you needed that little factoid, now you got it. All right, I think now we should get in close and we should start doing the Q&A. I think it's time. So let me see what I can find out in all of your chatter. I'm going to switch glasses again because I can't see. Oh my God. I just want some amazing LASIK. That's all I want. All right. Hey, Jamie, thanks for tuning on the live stream. I know you wrote this 39 minutes ago, but I'm just thanking you now. Reef and Dive says, I have 4 hours for you. You guys, spoil you guys one time. Alrighty, let's see. Ted says, does Spock rip that veggie clip off my tank? No, actually not at all. And we can put some nori in there. I just have to go grab a sheet. Hang on a second, I'll unplug the mic. Hopefully this won't make a horrible loud click on your end. All right. And why not show you guys this? The fish know what I'm about to do. They're super excited. Too bad I don't have some banana handy, because I know you guys always get a kick when I use banana in the tank. I shared a video about that on Facebook recently, and a lot of people were getting a kick out of it because no one thinks about putting banana in their tank. It was just some crazy idea I had once, and I do it occasionally as a treat. Alrighty. This one big piece is probably going to come off, so I'm just going to remove it. There you go, guys. I'll put this right there. And then we'll tilt this down again. So this veggie clip is called a Mega Veggie Mag, and it's made by Two Little Fishies, and I sell it in my shop. Okay, let's see. You're watching that, so I should get out of the way, right? And Derby City, I guess I just answered that in the video here a few minutes ago. Charlie says, my skimmer keeps getting smothered in algae from the lighting coming from the refugium. Is there any reef-safe paints I can use to cover the skimmer? Actually, what I recommend instead is for you to go ahead and just put a shield between the refugium and the skimmer. The light that's going through the air is what's getting on your skimmer, not light going through water. So your light is up high, it's shining down, and it's casting light on the side on the body of the skimmer. There's a type of black foam that is like 1/8 of an inch thick. You can cut it with a razor blade or scissors. It's about the size of a placemat. And you can secure that somehow inside your sump between the skimmer and the rest, like a barrier, like a curtain. And light can't pass through it. It's 99 cents for that big piece of foam. And you can just do that instead of altering your skimmer by painting it or putting vinyl on it or something like that, because you do want to see how your skimmer is doing. So I just prefer a shield. And I actually have an article on my website that I believe is called Necessary Shade or Shade Please, something like that. You could Google that right now, or I'll put it in the show notes later, and that way you'll have it available to you. But that is the best solution. And then, so clean your skimmer, get it nice and clean again, put the foam up, and boom, you're all taken care of. Ben says, is a nano calcium reactor a thing? I just have an 18-gallon tank, but it uptakes alkalinity at like 0.4 DKH per day. What are the acceptable DKH swings for you? Well, the best swing is none. So if you can just stay right at a certain number, like let's say DKH of 7 is what your tank is all the time, then you are set. And if you go down, it's 6.5, and you go back up, 7.5, but you stay as close to 7 as possible. The drop from 9 to 7 is why I lost lost some SPS. And it was SPS that died. All the parts that died were in spots that were low light. So they were, let's say, weaker than the rest. And that's not really surprising. It kind of makes sense. When you see down deep inside a coral and that part turns white, you're like, there's a lot of shade, doesn't get as much light. I guess I saw that coming. But when it's like, boom, there's a patch, and boom, there's a patch, then you have to be a little bit more concerned. All right, let me scoot over a little bit here. So is there such a thing as a nano calcium reactor? Yes, they do exist. I've seen them. The amount of money you'll spend to set it all up will be a little bit pricey, but they're so nice. When you run a calcium reactor instead of 2-part dosing or 3-part dosing, it's automatic, and for the most part, it's hands off. You don't have to keep dealing with it all the time. You just kind of set it up. When you're first setting it up, there's certain things you have to do. You kind of spend like about 23 days dialing it in with these little tiny adjustments and these corrections, and then you finally get it and like, oh, this is amazing. I love it. And when my calcium reactor went offline with lack of CO2 for 2 days, it was a huge difference on the tank's alkalinity. Which online retailers sell quality and affordable Indonesian corals? I do not know because I'm not a coral buyer like you guys. Let's see. You guys are crazy. You're asking for these super long streams. I'm seeing all the comments now. Mike says, didn't you lose some Monties a few weeks ago? Now some Acros. I'd be on high alert for something wrong. Not saying, just saying, food for thought. No, Mike, those are completely unrelated situations. I was losing Montipora for a very long time, over a period of, let's just call it 8 months, because I had stopped dosing magnesium entirely, because my Trident said my magnesium was over 1400. So I thought, well, if I'm over 1400, I'm not going to put any more in. But every time I took out my ELOS test kit, it said I was around 1300 or less. And I didn't know what to believe. Do I believe the high-end machine? Do I believe my titration kit? And basically I was being led to believe, obviously the Trident is going to be far more accurate than my handheld test. So after 8 months, I said, forget it. I'm going to go ahead and start dosing magnesium again. I don't care what the Trident says. And all my remaining Montipora all started coming back. But you saw me pull out a whole bunch of dead colony. This was back in, that video was shot November 10th. So that was 2 months ago, basically. Well, yeah, 2 months ago now, when I took all that out. But it had already been dead and ugly, or dying, or bleached, or whatever you want to call it. And I removed everything that was offensive, and that was all on the glass. I mean, there was so much growth on the glass, you couldn't use a cleaning magnet. It just was just an eyesore anyway, and it was obstructing flow. So I had to pull it. But the pieces I saved, I threw on the sand bed in the back, and I was just looking at them recently, and they are all colorful and purple again, and it's like, wow, look at that, that's great. And it's because I've been dosing magnesium. And today, when I was measuring, I got super excited because, hang on, focus. See where it says 1300 magnesium? That actually said 1400 at first, and I was like, wow, it matches the Trident, that's amazing. And then I was like, oh, you did the wrong math. It's 1300. So anyway, I'm going to keep dosing magnesium. I'm not going to sweat it. Interestingly, I do want to say this. I have not watched, even though I've been dosing magnesium every single day now for a couple of months, I have not seen the number go up and up on the Trident. So that is a weird one for me. I don't understand it. And I don't know if anyone can explain it or is willing to explain it. But it is what it is. It doesn't matter. So the loss of the Montipora was attributed to a lack of magnesium for a very long time, because I was being told there was plenty when there pretty much was not. My Montipora was very used to high magnesium, and I dosed a gallon every single month. So not putting any in for 8 months, the corals didn't like it. And this thing here with a couple of spots turning white, I contacted 2 friends, 2 close friends, and said, hey, I had a couple of corals turn white. And they're like, yeah. And then yesterday, one of them sent me a message, hey, how's the tank doing? And I said, it stopped, everything's fine. I was looking at the corals, and there's no spread or anything. It just, like I said, it was a little hiccup. It wasn't a disaster. So, hope that answered your question. Andrew says, how long in a power outage before you panic? I'd say panic is a strong word. So let's go with that one. Let's say that's exactly what you mean. 3 hours would be panic. Usually by 1 hour, I'm like, that's it. And I pull out the generator and I hook everything up to it. And everything's on autopilot until the power comes back on. I do have battery backups on my Vortec pumps to keep flow in the tank. And there's even battery backups on 2 Vectra pumps, so it keeps that flowing. But 3 hours of no flow in the tank would have me panicking. So that's why I bought a generator, just for those cases when I have to run it. And there's been times where I've had to run it for 4 or 5 hours. There's times where I've had to run it for 37 hours. Fortunately, we've never had like an epic one that's like a week or two. But yeah. You definitely, because the oxygen level drops, and then you start losing fish. Debbie says, I'm moving, which is a nightmare, with a 280-gallon reef. I'm shipping all the livestock. Your marathon reef was fantastic. I watched while packing, which made it so much better. That's a hard one. And yeah, I'm glad the stream helped. I mean, just the moving of a 280, that is so hard. And you're shipping the livestock. So that means someone has to receive the livestock on the other end, and it has to go into basically a tank that's ready to accept livestock immediately. And that's really hard. I'm almost at the point now, I've seen so many people try to do this where they want to move their stuff across the country and they filled up all their coolers and they loaded their tank and their stand and they hooked up a trailer and they hooked up air pumps and heaters and power inverters in the car to keep everything running. And then they travel across the US and they still lose stuff. So I'm almost at the point now where, as much as it would hurt to do it, I would sacrifice the livestock. I would basically say, you know, it's going to all the local people here, and I would start the fresh tank at the new location. And my friend Ryan has a 1,000-gallon reef in his home, and for a while he had someone holding his fish. I can't remember who it was. I don't know if it was a fish store or another hobbyist, but someone was holding all of his fish while he was moving from one house to another, from a, I guess, 400-gallon tank to a 1,000-gallon tank. And even the fish sitter didn't work out. He ended up losing quite a few fish, and he was very upset about that. So, I mean, there are pets. I get it. We don't want to, you know, I don't even know what I would do in moving Spock. It would be really hard. I'd have to really think the logistics through on that one to make it successful. But anyway, I hope your move goes well, and I hope that the majority of your livestock does really well. And you know, please let us know what happened. You know, I mean, I don't want to sound like a wet blanket. I want to encourage you. Oh man, it's so hard because it's living things. It's not like you're moving books from a bookcase, you know? That's totally easy. All right. Marcus says, what baking soda? What type, please? You know the Arm & Hammer baking soda, like we put in the back of the refrigerator to get rid of smell? That stuff. That is sodium bicarbonate, and we put that on a cookie sheet, and we bake it. And you bake it in your oven, I think it's at 375 for like 50 minutes or 60 minutes. And then what you've done is you've baked the CO2 out of it, and now you have soda ash instead of baking soda. And soda ash is what we use to raise alkalinity. And once you've baked it, you pour that into a sealed container, like one of those. I have those plastic things like sandwich lunch meat comes in with a lid on top, and you know they're made by Ziploc. And you just put all the powder you baked in there, and that is your soda ash for anything you want to do. I also just sell soda ash if you don't want to make your own, and that's available in the shop as well if you'd like to get that. It's cheaper to make your own. Let's see. Jason says, can I use white vinegar for cleaning filter socks? You can. You can use white vinegar. You can use bleach. What else? I haven't tried citric acid because that's new to me, so I can't tell you what that would do. But if you do use bleach, then you need to rinse it really well. You might want to soak them in a solution of water with Prime, which is a dechlorinator. And then you want to let them air out for 24 hours so that any ammonia left in the sock will evaporate into the atmosphere outside. And then you've got all these socks ready to go in. Derby City Reefer says, I'm about to add metal halides to my 6-foot, 125-gallon reef. How far away should I hang them from the water? The general rule of thumb for metal halide bulbs is 9 inches off the water. Unless you have the reflectors I have, then it's 14 to 16 inches off the water. The Lumen Bright reflectors are crazy intense, and if you put them closer to the water, you end up getting like the high beams on your car, and you'll have like 3 pillars of light in your tank if you have 3 of them. And it looks terrible, but by raising them up to 16 inches off the water, the light spreads beautifully, and you can't even tell where one starts and the next one stops. Raul says, did you order the Wyze cameras yet? No, not yet, but I will. I will. You just told me yesterday. Give me a second. I was so glad to get that sump out of here. You guys have no idea. Let's see. If your metal halide is closer to the water than 9 inches, so 9 to 12. 9 to 12, anywhere in there. If you like 9 inches, great. If you like 12, great. The only thing is you don't want the bulbs to get splashed, and you definitely don't want to get burned by one. You know, when you're reaching in the tank and you hit your arm on, you'll get a bad burn on your skin. So be really careful about that. But some light fixtures or pendants have a glass shield in them. That's not regular window glass. That is, what do they call that? Tempered glass. And tempered glass doesn't block your light. You're not losing light. I know there's a tiny bit of a drop off putting anything between the bulb and the water, but it's not enough to worry. And tempered glass will handle the heat and won't shatter. It won't crack. Well, it won't crack. It can shatter. That's what it's designed to do. It's supposed to explode into a million pieces if you were to drop it. And so that way you don't get gashed and cut open your wrist. Instead, you have confetti everywhere. But don't buy window pane glass for a light fixture you bought used, because that will crack as soon as the heat of the bulb hits it. Jay, that cannot be right for metal halides. That's not good. Plus, that adds a ton of heat to your tank, so I wouldn't recommend that. Gideon says, Mark, have you seen the articles about corals absorbing all the light they can in 4 hours? And how are some people doing 4-8, 4-8 schedule? I don't know that schedule, so I can't answer that one. But there's just, if you start digging into articles, I came across a really cool, I was looking for information recently about white light versus blue light for a big discussion I had on Facebook. And I came across one article after another, and I came across this really cool paragraph that I shared. I'm not going to bother trying to find it now because it'll take me forever, because nothing's easy to find on Facebook. But it stated how the degree of the sun would affect the intensity. So the lower it is on the horizon, obviously the weaker the light, and as it comes up higher and higher, it becomes more and more intense. And my whole point is that that 4-hour window, let's call it from 11 to 2 or something like that. Is that 4 hours? that's 3 hours. It's called 10 to 2. That's when you get the heat of the day. In Texas, it's from 12 to 4. That's when we get our heat of the day. But the directionality of the sun coming down on a reef is not 12 hours a day. It's not 9 hours a day. It's not 8 hours a day. They have low light. The light's bouncing off the sun. Off the surface of the water, going up, and some's penetrating. But as the sun comes higher, it shoots down through the water and really. And then the glimmer lines can't be ignored either, because the glimmer lines are rocking across the corals repeatedly as the surface of the water ripples. And if you're measuring par on a coral and you could stop the glimmer, just like stop the clock, so to speak, you could measure the par at that moment, and it's crazy high for a 1/10 of a second, and then it goes back to the normal par. And the glimmer lines are hugely important for corals, and that's why we want our surface rippling. It does that with the light, and the corals benefit. But going with longer periods, because of the symbiotic algae within the coral, the zooanthellae, it uses light to grow the algae within its tissue, and there's only so much photosynthesis anything can handle, and then you're past the point of good, and it goes downhill. So, for example, mangroves can't be under 24-hour a day light. It'll cause the little tree bush to wilt. Mangrove tree. They look like bushes at first, and then they become a tree. And with corals, when you run the lights way too long, you end up losing corals. So when people are telling me, hey, I'm having problems with my corals or I'm having too much algae, I always look at the photo period and, of course, phosphate. Those two things, they just go hand in hand. And I don't, you'll be amazed how well a reef can look with less light. If you choose, like let's say you went like, okay, Mark, I'm going to go with 4-hour high noon, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put an hour and a half of ramp up, an hour and a half ramp down, so now you're up to 7-hour day. And you just watch your tank. You're like, you know, my tank's doing pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and add an extra 30 minutes, you know, to my day. I'm going to ramp down slower. And you run it for like a week or two. And you're like, you know what? I'm going to go another 30 minutes. And then you go another week or two and observe. That's the thing about coral reefs. When we set up these tanks and something happens in them, my default general rule is like, whatever happened, let's see how it looks in 12 weeks. Which I prefer to say 12 weeks rather than 3 months, because 3 months sounds like forever. 12 weeks, that's just 12 live streams, right? It's not that long away. But when things go badly in a tank and things lose their color, my general thought is like, in 12 weeks, we'll see how it looks. We'll see if it's doing better, because it takes a while for that to recover and start improving and then start growing again. And instead of going with a really long day and fighting to make life happen, go with a shorter day and then grow your period gradually over a 6-month period to what you consider a longer day. But I just don't see the point of going with these super long 12-hour days. Looking for the next question. Thanks, Christine, for putting the link up for the FluxRx. D-Dot says, I treated my frag tank with flatworm exit. I took my hippo and clownfish out first and have them in another tank. That's a good idea. Everything seems fine except one Duncan hasn't opened up. I did a 10-gallon water change. You didn't say how big your frag tank was. And about 6 hours after that, and then another 10 gallons in the morning the next day, and still the Duncan hasn't opened. Well, basically, you waited too long. You have to do a big, big water change. I think, trying to remember the rule for flatworm exit. I think you have to do that big water change like within 2 hours. It's quick. It's not a thing where you just do some 6 hours later and then another one the next day, another one. But in the meantime, you know, what's done is done. At this point, run carbon in a reactor and let it pull out whatever it's in the water, and hopefully that Duncan will start opening up again. But odds are the Duncan got burned by some of the ammonia from the flatworms that died because you took too long to change water. Flatworm exit's a big topic. Matter of fact, I did a video specifically about treating for flatworms, and it goes in conjunction with my article. So either read the article on my website or go ahead and rewatch that stream where we talked about treating tanks for flatworms, because that's a really dangerous scenario, and you want to be completely prepared before you do it so that nothing goes wrong. Let's see. By the way, there's 293 of you on here right now. I think everyone's waiting for 4 hours. Hey, Joel, thanks for liking my shirt. All I care about is my aquarium and like maybe 3 people. I saw that years ago. I was like, oh my God, I need that shirt. And then when I was traveling, I went to Hydro Aquatics, which is in Florida, and got my shirt. So I was really happy about that. And then Marine Depot came up with one similar. It says, all I care about is my reef tank and like maybe 3 people. And see here, here's an example. Derek says, I've used Phosphate RX from you and didn't lose any fish. I have a yellow, a purple, a powder blue, a coal, and 2 blue tangs. So yeah, it's so strange when some people lose the yellow tangs. All right. Okay, this is a weird one. I have a 1 gallon only zoanthid jar reef, the normal lighting period. I've considered but not used a 24/7 lighting period. I feel that zoas need rest time. What do you think? Yeah, they absolutely need rest time. Why would you ever run them 24 hours? I don't even understand why that thought crossed your mind. It's completely unnatural. So yeah, no, just run a normal light period over that tank. And post some pictures in Club Milo's Reef. I'd love to see it. It sounds adorable. So there's our Club Milo's Reef clip art. And it's facebook.com/groups/Milo's Reef. And you guys are, if you're not a member right now, I think we're around 6,200 people. And a lot of people are sharing their tanks lately, which is really fun to see everyone else's aquariums and not just mine. Michael says, have you dealt with flukes on a tang? I have not. I've been lucky. David says, do you have any advice on keeping an Aussie Gold Torch happy? Any care or tips? I don't. I haven't kept any torches long term, even Aussie Gold ones. It's an LPS coral. Torch corals sting their neighbors, which is one of the reasons that I don't really like keeping that kind of coral in my tank, because there's a chance it'll sting something I care about. So I'm more about hammers and frog spawns because they get along really well. They do have to be fed once or twice a week. There's different foods. A lot of people like to use reef roids. A lot of people like to use Benereef. You can actually squirt very fine foods like fish eggs or mini mysis, or you can thaw some Rod's food and squirt that toward the coral when the pumps are off and let it capture some food. But that would all be my guesswork on what it needs. There may be way better advice out there on the web, so maybe check Google and see what you can find. I don't think asking the coral sellers what to do will be beneficial, because they probably bring them in, sell them, and get more in and sell them, and get more in and sell them. They're not keeping them long term like you're trying to do. So you're really going to want to talk to other hobbyists or find articles about them where there's maybe a care guide. Matter of fact, Live Aquarium might have a really good short, brief article about the torch coral and what it needs to keep it healthy. But I don't have the answer for you. Callie says, I run my lights from 11 a.m. to 8:30 p.m., I'm assuming. That only would make sense. With a 1 hour ramp up, and I'd assume a 1 hour ramp down. I would reduce your lighting. Seriously, I would. I would shorten the day. That's not too bad, though. 11 to 8, that's only 9 hours, 9.5 hours. If your tank's doing well, you know what? Okay, so I should have started the entire conversation with, if your tank is doing great, you don't have to change anything. But if you're dealing with some struggling issues, this change in lighting could help solve some things. I should have said that. I apologize, everyone. But yeah, if your tank's doing well, stick with the schedule. And if you're seeing issues, then maybe adjust it down a little bit and see how it does. And then after 8 weeks or so, if you don't see any improvement, you can go back to what you had. And it doesn't cost you anything. It costs you less because you're using less electricity. Jay says, I will say that I stopped using socks. I've had to clean the sump plenty. Still better than dealing with socks all the time. Yeah. I'm the same. I am running the Clarity, which captures a lot of stuff. But on the both sides under the Clarity, and I need to take a quick video clip of it today, actually, so I can get that video out. There's it rains down detritus on both sides of the Clarity. I guess it flakes off the fabric as it's passing through the mechanism. And so I do use the VCA vacuum attachment on my MaxiJet, and I vacuum up all of the detritus out of the sump about once a month, that little bit there, because I like it nice and clean, and it's great. But I don't actually run filter socks that catch things, and I have 3 drains going into my sump, and only one goes into the Clarity. The other one goes into the skimmer section, and the other one goes in the refugium, and so there's nothing to capture anything on those lines. That's just pure raw water going into the sump. Mass asked the question, I noticed that I never get white tips on my SPS. They are crazy full of polyps. My alkalinity is around 7. Would a higher alk give me white tips? Okay, so when a coral is growing and it bursts forth a new brand little tip, that will be white or pink. a hint of yellow. I mean, there's a little coloration, but it almost looks bleached because it's brand new. It hasn't had a time for basically the symbiotic algae to get up into it and to color under your lighting. It takes some time. Now, if none of your corals are showing tips, and I guess it depends what kind of SPS coral you're talking about. Certain ones are less prone to grow a tip. Like this one here is, you can see that tip right there. That's not white. It's actually baby blue. It's really pretty. And then the core itself is more in a deeper green normally. But that one gets the white tips. The Drew's Acro, sometimes there's a little bit of white. Like that one there has a little speck of white on there. But most of it stays pink. There's a little bit there. Bird's Nest will get a sharp white point. That's very normal. Now, it could be if you're using a lot of blue light only, you're not getting that type of growth. And your alkali being at 7, maybe there's a reason why you've chosen that low a number. If your nitrates and phosphates are super low and you're running GFO, you're like, I have to keep alkaline at 7, then don't change it. But if you are not dealing with ultra low nutrients, which I never am, so I don't have to think about it, I keep mine at 9. If you were to go up from 7 to 9, for example, gradually, and you get it there and keep it there, you may see the tips of your acropores actually burning because of the ultra low nutrients and the GFO in the water, in the system. So that's kind of a trick. You have to, everything has to work together properly. But I think you might need some daylight on the tank. I don't know if you're running any kind of white lighting or if you're really one of those guys who just loves blue all the time. But I think that you would see more growth and possibly faster growth, which could create these white tips where everything's bursting out with new growth from getting some daylight. So that would be one of the things I'd be looking for is if you're running any daylight. Brett Miller says, what's your opinion on carbon dosing? What method do you suggest? There's a lot of different methods on the market, and the one that is the oldest would be dosing vodka. And vodka doesn't have to be super expensive, but it definitely should not be the absolute bottom of the barrel cheapest one either. I made that mistake once. I used it for a few weeks and my Reef looked horrible. I was like, wow, my Reef hates this crap. And I threw it away and got a better bottle of vodka. And by better, I mean it wasn't $4 a gallon, it was like 11. So I'm not talking about top shelf. I don't want you to go, Mark says you have to get Grey Goose. I did not say that. But I bought something called White Wolf, and I think you could strip paint off your house with it. Tasted terrible, smelled terrible, the Reef hated it. So anyway, that's one carbon dose. Another carbon dose people do is white vinegar. A third one is sugar. And then some people mix all three, VSV, and did that. And I never went that route. I did carbon dosing specifically with the vodka solution for about 3 years back in the day. Jamie says, are there any options on getting my magnesium back down? The tank seems fine. Well, what's the number? You can't answer that question without more detail. And what is your profile pic? Is that from a game? Danielle asked, thoughts on the API phosphate test kit. I've never used it, but someone recently did and sent me a picture of it. It looked sort of easy to read. I've been using Elos forever. Before that, I was using Salifert. Those are the two phosphate test kits I like because they're super easy and they're fast. And I don't find them hard to read at all. Either you got deep blue, which is bad, or you have clear, which is great. And obviously, any kind of gradient within that area is your phosphate level. I don't see the point in buying an ultra low phosphate test kit because my phosphates are never ultra low. But some of you guys that have zero phosphate all the time, I guess you need it. For me, a regular phosphate kit that can measure from 0 to 3.0 is a great kit. So, and they're not expensive. Gary asked the question, is it a good idea to add bacteria every now and then? If so, what's your recommendation? How much? How often? That's a great question. That's a whole topic. It depends what you're trying to accomplish. Are you trying to diversify your bacteria strains in the tank? Are you trying to buffer them up to have more bacteria in the tank? What's your end goal besides just adding bacteria to your tank? If you are running biopellets, you have to add bacteria every single week to replace what's dying off in the biopellet reactor. And so in that case, Microbacter 7 is something you'd use weekly. If you're dosing something like I am, which is Prodibio, that one is 2 vials. One is a bacteria that eats waste and one's a bacteria that fuels the system. And I use those every 15 days for the last 9 years. So that one. If you're wanting to use something from Fritz, they have a bacteria that usually you use to start up a tank. If you're wanting to use something from Brightwell, Brightwell just came up with something brand new that recently got mentioned on Reef Filters as well. I think they called it XLM or something like that. And I had the link buried here somewhere. I'll never find it again. Hang on, let's see if I can find it. Bookmarks. Yeah, of course maybe it's alphabetical. I don't know where it went. I knew when I saved it, I had no idea where it was going to save it to. It'd be nice if it could show me the last thing I bookmarked somehow, but Anyway, there's a new one from Brightwell that is pretty interesting, and it's getting some rave reviews. It's great for cycling a tank quicker. There are other products on the market that have some bacteria in them. There's some foods that have bacteria in them. There's Live Rock Enhanced that has bacteria in them. I mean, there's so many. Like I said, we have to know what you're trying to accomplish. If you're just trying to increase your biodiversity in the tank with other bacteria strains, it's nice to get a cup of sand from another hobbyist or from the fish store, and then turn off the flow in your tank, lower the cup or the Ziploc bag of sand down to the substrate, and then gently pour it out into a pile, and then restart your pumps. And in the next 12 hours or so, it's going to level itself out pretty much. Or you can kind of spread it out with like a Kent scraper to kind of make it so you don't have this weird hill in your tank. That's one way to get extra bacteria. And another bacteria you can get is by buying a bag of live sand, and you would wipe the bag down really clean, and you'd move any corals off the substrate that might be in the way, and you cut the top of the bag with a razor blade, and you lower the bag in the tank, and then you invert it, and you lift the bag out and pour the new live sand in, and you've just added a whole bunch of bacteria to your tank. And that one I used to do 2 times a year. My 280-gallon tank, I had to put in 2 bags of sand a year in my tank to replace what was being consumed. Tim asks, hey Mark, when are you thinking about setting up the algae turf scrubber? I'm hoping to do it this week. I had 0 time last week. I had to get that sump out. It was due by January 10th, and I got it done. So it's sitting here next to me. The brand is Foursquare Aquatics, and it's sold by BRS. And I heard, rumor, that he's working on a smaller one too. So I don't know I don't know any timeline on that, but I heard there's a smaller one in the works. Albert says, I want to order a sump. What to do? It's been running for half a year, and it's in metric. It's 120 by 120 by 60. That sounds like a 40-gallon tank to me for some reason. I don't know. I'm probably wrong about that. Maybe it's smaller. If you're asking me if I can build a sump for you, I probably can. It sounds like you're wanting me to ship it overseas. Odds are you just want to order a sump from someone in your local area, and I can still help you out if you want. You can just email me through my website. Click Contact Us, and I'll do what I can to help you. Mere Reef is opening a can of worms with me. Let's talk lighting. Since green and red are not used by corals, can we get good growth in corals by just running blue lights? What gives faster growth in corals, lower Kelvin or more blue? All right. So the red and green, I don't even care about. I have no opinion on that whatsoever. What I care about is good growth and how it looks to the eye, as well as what I relate to actual nature. So when I go on my trips around the world to different dive sites, and I've been to a lot of countries, and I've been in the ocean a lot of times. Not as much as I want, but a lot. And I dive in to crystal clear water under sunlight conditions, and I see beautiful corals thriving in shallow waters, and then I swim out further and I dive down. If I'm snorkeling, I can only go so far. My ears can't take it. But if I'm diving with scuba gear, I can go down. And yeah, the water gets more murky. The lighting is less intense. But the shimmer lines are still coming down there and they're rippling across the corals. It's really cool, unless it's a cloudy day. And the world down there is not blue like people like to say. It's just not. There's blue down there, yes, but it's not like Papa Smurf peed in the ocean and that's the color. So I think people are getting caught up on that. Like, well, the water in the ocean's blue, so that just proves you only need blue light. No. White light grows corals. Blue light makes them pretty. Having a mixture of both is ideal. Adding in some red or adding in some green or adding in some UV, these are all ways to dial it in and kind of fine tune it to find that sweet spot. I actually like the way my Radeon works in the Anemone Cube, even though most people would hate the look. It starts off in blue and it switches over into, I don't know, a 14K spectrum, goes to 12, goes to 10K, maybe even dips below that. And then it kind of works its way back up until the intense blue late at night, which is the pictures I usually put on Instagram because people love things that glow. But during the day, that tank's not nearly as gorgeous. Matter of fact, the 6-year anniversary video, I posted it under a lot of 10K lighting. I stood in front of the tank with all the metal halides in 10K light, only intentionally to show you what corals look like in sunlight. And there was compliments, and there was one guy that called it a brown, swampy, hideous tank. And I just wrote him back, said, did you get to the 20-minute mark? And he just wrote back that he was laughing and he didn't believe me and there's no way that's the same tank. Surprise! It's the same tank! So having different spectrums benefits your reef and lets it grow naturally. I'm not scientific enough to get into debating nanometers and these wavelengths in Kelvin. And even when I call Tulio, who I feel is a very strong lighting expert in our industry, even he's like, Mark, why are you asking me these questions? Why are you dragging me into these debates? And I'm like, I just feel like you know way more than I do, so handle it, you know? But it's almost like a hot button for some people. If you want to run only blue light all the time, let's say 18,000 Kelvin to 20,000 Kelvin, which is that deep blue spectrum, or even deeper, you'll get coral growth, but it's going to be very, very slow. And if you were to switch to 10,000 Kelvin, which is white with a crisp blue, it's that clean white look, you will get much faster growth. And if you dip all the way down to 6,500 Kelvin, which used to be the light bulbs we have in our homes, nowadays we've all changed to LEDs. I don't know what they are. They're probably 3,000 Kelvin or 5,000 Kelvin or something. You would get phenomenal growth, but your tank would look like crap. Now that was brown swamp color. So you have to kind of choose what you want to look at. But if you can run that white spectrum you don't like as much during the daytime when you're not there at work, while you're at work and you're not there to look at it, why not? I actually work near my tank, so I see it through all the different spectrums it goes through. And I enjoy seeing the change. It's not the same boring thing every single day. One of my friends says, when he doesn't work on his tank, when he kind of ignores it, he says that I'm treating it like furniture. That's what he says about himself. I am treating it like furniture. I'm not being a good hobbyist. And I'm like, well, have you tested your water? And he's like, no, I need to do that. So, he starts doing it. Then he cleans his tank and, he sees the corals. He's looking at his fish and he feels better. And he says, look, Mark, I'm not treating it like furniture. That's good. It is a hobby for a reason. A hobby is something you keep working on. It's something you enjoy. So if you can appreciate your tank with all the different looks it can go through, I think that's better than trying to be stubborn and say, you only need this one wavelength and everything will grow under it and I have scientific proof. There's a few articles that totally support the blue, but they're few and far between. And there's way more articles that talk about the full spectrum of lighting that we should be embracing. And that's kind of it. I don't know. I don't really want to argue about it. I feel like it's been done. It's been said. It's been hashed out to death. MJ Simple Reefer says, I'm doing a 30-gallon water change on my 60-gallon tank while watching your stream, and I'm trying to get my nitrates below 100. what are your nitrates right now? How old is your test kit? How often do you test? And if you just did a 50% water change, your nitrates, if they were 100, should be 50. If they were 200, they should be 100. Every 50% water change you do will cut the nitrates in half. It could be a fish-only system, so it's not as critical as someone with corals. Derek says, I'm using a calcium reactor for 90% of the calcium and alkalinity demand, and I dose ESV 2-part with Trident controlled dose to take care of the remaining 10%. Yeah, that's a kind of a hybrid method of maintaining your tank. And then if for some reason something did go wrong with the calcium reactor, in essence, you should be able to go into Fusion and ramp up all your dosing on your 2-part to make up for it, especially if you're traveling. And that was one of the things that Terrence recommended to me on the Neptune group when I told him what happened, when I told everyone. He said, if you had dosing pumps or the dose hooked up, you would have the ability to transition or even set up your Apex to automatically transition to a higher dose to keep up while the calcium reactor is offline because you're not even in the same state because you're out of town. I was in the living room next to the tank when I discovered the problem, and I could walk across the room and solve it. But he's not wrong. That's true. I just wonder, and so your hybrid method of using 90% of that and 10% with the other is good because you're constantly using all of it. I was going to say if mine was supplying what my tank needs 100% of the time, and the dose was there with 2-part solution for the emergency, like insurance, my concern would be if it's been sitting dormant for a long time, would it even run properly? Or would it be a potential failure point because I never turned it on except in an emergency? It's just like owning a generator and never turning it on. And then when you finally need it and you're pulling on the cord and it won't start because we're supposed to maintain it. You have to change the oil on it occasionally. They recommend if you own a generator that once a month you should pull it out, turn it on, let it run for 20 minutes, and then put it away again. And that way everything is fresh. You need to also have a fuel additive in there to help the gas from breaking down. I forget what they call it. I think it's called Stable. And you pour that into the gasoline that's in the generator. So anyway, these are things that we have to do. And so I don't know if I'll add the dose and have another thing under my tank with alkaline and calcium as a side thing. I think I'll just set up better alerts and maybe start tracking the pH in the calcium reactor via the Apex rather than a pH controller. And kind of, I don't know, complicate yet simplify my life. Robert says, I have an RO system with no DI. Before the system, it's measuring 50 TDS. Afterwards, it's measuring 0. That's pretty amazing. No, if you're getting 0, I would not add a DI. You're already there. That's really cool. I had some friends that lived, well, I know in Atlanta, this was crazy. The guy had such amazing tap water in Atlanta. The TDS coming out of the faucet was 6. 6! He didn't even need an RO system. He basically just needed something to put that water through DI. And he said, technically, it's such a low number, I'm halfway tempted just to use it like that and not even put it through a DI. It's like, wow. Where I live, the measure of TDS is around 175 or so. So I'm kind of lucky. There's people over in Phoenix, or I'm sorry, that's too specific. In Arizona, it could be Tucson or Phoenix. I think it was Phoenix, actually. They were measuring like 800 to 1500 TDS depending on what part of the state it was. It was unbelievable how high it was. And there was also a place not too far from me called Grapevine in Texas. It's north of the airport. And over there, on one side of the street, it measures over 800. And on the other side of the street, it's much better water. And it's you know, water just varies from place to place. But yeah, if you're getting it down to 0, that's fantastic. I wouldn't worry about adding a DI. Michael asks, would it be a good idea to not glue or cement the aquascape if I'm keeping bubble tip anemones in a mixed reef? I just thought to make moving corals easier. If you don't bond the rocks, there's a chance you'll have a rock slide one day. And that's the downside. If you're gluing the corals to the rocks and you're saying it'll be easier to move the entire rock-covered coral, you know, rock covered in coral, away from the anemone so it won't sting it, that's smart. I could see that. In my own tank, what I chose to do was I bonded all the foundation together. So all the bottom rocks are supported with an acrylic support system underneath the sand. You don't even see it. And then some of the rocks above were then bonded together with a cement and allowed to cure. And then I put the rest of the rocks on top. Those are balanced. But I don't have a rock slide because the foundation is solid. So everything stays in their puzzle piece. Like Legos, it stays perfectly. Tim says, since you do acrylic work, have you considered making custom tops? I haven't. I have not gone into that whole side of the business. The thing about tops, they end up being big. So you're shipping big flat boxes with something made of acrylic or polycarbonate. You got to route the groove for the spline, I think it's called, where you put in that rubber gasket that holds the screen in place. And there's companies out there that's all they do. So I just let them do it. And I don't. I just don't. I don't know. Luke asks about what shoaling fish you would want for a 70-foot-gallon aquarium. You can definitely do the blue-green chromis. They're great. Bengai cardinals will stay in a cluster. Pajama cardinals might do it. There's another tiny fish that I bought a couple years ago. They didn't live long enough, though. But they stayed in a cluster, and they were really pretty. Red spot goby, I think it was called. Also, barred gobies swim in groups. I can see the fish in my head. The red pseudochromis, they love to swim in groups. Those are cool. And if you're really crazy, you can get a harem of flame angels, which is gorgeous. One of my friends years ago, he had 5 flame angels in his tank, and when he put food in, all this red would just swim in a circle. It was fantastic. And I was like, wow, I've never seen anyone own 5. You know, I've seen 1 or 2 in a tank, but never 5. It was really, really neat. Vitali says, or Vitali, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I used FluxRx, and after 72 hours I ran carbon. It was way too soon. FluxRx is a 21-day treatment, so that's probably why you still have algae. This is something that you have to follow those instructions more closely. And Danielle, I think I answered this one already. I'm not sure. Elos is my favorite phosphate test kit right now. And it's not expensive. It might be $19. It's on my website. I'll turn this guy off, and I'll throw this one back up here. Shameless plug. Actually, you guys, when you place orders on my website, I really do appreciate it. It does help pay the bills and allows me to keep doing what I'm doing here. I really enjoy doing our streams. I love getting with you guys every single week. And of course, during the week, I hit you up on social media via Instagram and Facebook, and I catch up with you as well. And it's so much fun. And I feel like we're family. You know, more and more of us get together and we all hang out. And this has been a really good medium. I remember years ago when I was resisting the urge to get on YouTube. I was like, I have the articles on my website. I don't need to get on YouTube. But I really do enjoy meeting up with you guys and hearing how the stream helped you, or how certain videos I did helped you with your tank, and how things are going well. Would you recommend plastic board underneath the rocks between the bottom glass? If so, what do you recommend? There was something that people were using years ago called starboard, which is basically cutting board material. The problem with starboard is it is buoyant. So it wants to float straight up. And that's a problem because you've got this big sheet and you're trying to put rock in there, and the foundation's floating upward. So what some people would do is they'd put something really heavy on top, like they'd fill up socks with sand or something, and they'd lay it on top of the starboard, and then they'd aquascape, and then they'd remove the sock holders, for lack of a better term. And that worked out okay for them. But the others had tried to silicone it down to help it not bubble up or float off, but it can tear itself loose. It's not the best thing to silicone to glass. Other people have used egg crate, which is lighting diffuser, but then you have all those little holes that could just trap detritus, which may not be good. I've never set up a tank with any of those things underneath my rock work. The only thing I did on this reef was an acrylic support system. There's actually sheets of acrylic on the bottom of the tank, and there's all these different heights of acrylic rod that are 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch that are standing up like pillars, and all my rock is sitting on each one. Every single rock on the bottom of my tank is standing on a tripod of 3 pieces of acrylic. And so the rock is about this high off the bottom of the tank, and then I filled it with sand so you don't see the acrylic support system. But there's an article on Reef Addicts you could check out if you want to see it. It looks really cool. And it's worked out really well, and it's been the foundation of this rock work for over 6 years with 0 rock slides. The benefit of putting something under your rock work is so you don't have so much weight that it just makes the bottom of the tank collapse and break. That happens occasionally, and I don't know why that happens. I mean, all of us have reef tanks, all of us put rock in our tanks, and yet only occasionally someone will say, oh my God, the bottom let go, and they show the picture, and you're just, it's like an earthquake inside an aquarium. It's awful. So when that happens, you know, I feel badly for them. But it's not common. You know, it's not like it happens to everyone, so we all do something, you know. I don't think putting a sheet of acrylic under there is going to be helpful. I don't think putting another piece of glass in there is going to be helpful. Maybe just don't use too much rock. Maybe just use the right amount. And you know, a lot of you guys use dry rock, which is super light when it goes in the tank anyway. And then it gets more dense as it loads up with life and bacteria over time. But no, I don't actually recommend putting anything underneath the rock inside the tank. Carl, I'm going to tell you this once. It's not going to happen today. He was saying that he wanted another marathon live stream. Let's see. John says, I've been having algae appear on the glass daily after scraping. Around the sand bed is some green algae, but it's hard and not scrapable or scrubbable. How do I get this off my glass? Well, let's start with the stuff on the glass daily. Your phosphates are too high. I mean, it's absolutely true. If you're growing algae, film algae on your glass more and more abundantly, your phosphates have risen in the tank. You need to get those back down. And then staying on top of it is ideal. Sometimes your tank will go kind of through like an algae bloom and just seems to come back super fast day after day after day. You're like, oh my God, why is this happening? I don't remember this happening and I wish it would stop. Yeah, that happens sometimes. It's rare. I think it happened to me once where it was like for 21 days, like this is insane. And I kept cleaning it. Now, cleaning by the sand bed, but not scratching your glass, the best thing you can use is a razor blade. And you just carve that stuff off. If you don't want to use a razor blade because you're worried about scratching the glass, then use a credit card or a gift card, like, you know, when people give you a gift card. And you can use that to scrape off that stubborn algae, and that'll get it clean. Some people use the flipper cleaning magnet that has the metal blade, and they go down, down, down toward the sand, not going sideways, and this helps avoid any kind of scratching of the glass. So those are some things you can use that will help. Reducing the phosphate will actually even reduce the stubbornness of that algae down low in your tank. Mr. Moo, fun name. What is your recommended order of filters in an RODI system? Well, there are so many different kinds on the market, but in general speaking, you've got a sediment filter and a carbon, a membrane, and a DI in that order. But like on the ones I sell, it's sediment, carbon, carbon, membrane, DI. And the 2 carbons trap a lot of the ammonia and chlorine that comes through our tap water. It also traps trace metals. If you're on a well, it helps remove some of the metals that come out of well water. The sediment catches the crud, and the sediment filter is white. And when people pull it out and it is brown, like chocolate brown, I'm like, really, you waited that long? That's like your nose is stuffy and you're like, that's okay, I'll feel better later, I'll breathe through my mouth. And then you jam some tissue in your nose I'll just breathe through this tissue, which you can because your nose is already stuffed. Anyway, point is the sediment filter should be replaced as soon as it starts getting discolored and looks bad. Just get it out, put a new one in. It's the cheapest filter, it's $5. And then the other thing is people talk about Micron ratings, and they want to go from like a 10 micron sediment filter, or let's say 5. They want to go to a 5 micron sediment, to a 1 micron carbon, to a 0.5 micron, way overkill. And typically what happens is everything is clogging up as it works its way through the chain, and the membrane gets starved of the water pressure it deserves. So instead, I sell 1 micron for all of my stuff. I believe they're all 5s. Watch me be wrong. Maybe they're all 10s. I can't remember. I try not to memorize every single thing because I can look it up later and I can just double check. But let's just say everything's 10 micron because that sounds right. So I have a 10 micron sediment. I have 2 10 micron carbons. I have the membrane that does the bulk of the work, and then it goes out into a DI, which has no micron measurement at all. But I've been selling them like that for over 15 years, and I don't have people complaining that their RO systems aren't working. And that's the most important part. So by switching to these super tight micron levels, you get more complaints and more issues and people saying it's not working right. And it's because they're making it so much harder for the system to run. So I don't recommend that. Amir, thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate that. And yeah, that was a great live stream. So it was super long. Let's see. Wow. Mr. Reef Buster said, my 22-gallon Nano is currently going through a 4-month no light cycle, so beneficial bacteria can grow on the dry rocks. How many hours should they run after the 4 months? Well, 4 months is a long time. Man, you are super patient. You only need to run as much light as the livestock demands. So if you're starting off with just some fish, how much light do fish need? Is there enough ambient light in the room that the fish can see? Maybe flip on the light for a couple hours in the evening when you're feeding and enjoying your fish. As you start adding corals, you'll want to increase your photo period based on the needs of the coral, like I talked about earlier. But wow, I can't believe you waited 4 months. Scott Morrison, who is had brain surgery a year ago, has a 52-liter tank and has a high-fin goby and wants to add 2 clowns and a ruby red dragon eye. Is that too many fish for that size tank? 52 liters. That sounds like 13 gallons or so to me. Is that right? You can have several small fish in that tank. Just stick with tiny fish. And if you have tiny fish, there's not a bioload. It's when you start adding larger fish, like a small tang or a dwarf angel, or I don't know, things like of that nature. They're a little too big for such a small tank. When it comes to pico tanks and nano tanks, we have a very light fish load. We use very small fish. It's the smarter move, and you can enjoy a lot of little fish. Like they have these little tiny neon tetras, neon gobies, and they're really small. And you can have a whole bunch of little guys in there, and they're just hanging out on the walls, and they're up near the top, and they're perched on top of rocks. Those are fun. So that might be a good choice. But what you described, those fish choices so far, seems okay. The clowns will be the biggest ones in the tank, actually. Even the ruby red dragon will be smaller. Let's see. How we doing? 300 people! I was wondering if we were going to hit 300 today. That's nice. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. I appreciate it. Chosen Jacob is getting a little political on us today. Halides in 2020? Don't tell Greta she'll sail to your house. Sail, I like that. A sailboat. And demand you remove them. How dare you? No, I've been a metal halide guy forever. I have zero desire to switch to LEDs on my Reef. That's funny. Tim B says, any chance you'll put up some of the videos we've heard you talking about? Yes. You know, you're reminding me doesn't motivate me more. I'm already bugging myself that I need to do these things. Yeah, I get it. It's, you know, I haven't even, until this moment, how far are we into the stream? An hour and 49 minutes, and I just now am mentioning my back for the first time. It's been terrible. And you don't know how many pills I took to build that sump. So many pills I was in, you know, just to survive it. But I had to get the sump done. So, yeah, sitting and editing videos sounds simple, but it's not. And I definitely focus on making the video right, so it waits until I have the time and the energy and I feel good. But yeah, there's only like 40 videos I want to get out. I need to do it somehow. Let's see. Already discussed that. I'm going to scroll down because I feel like a lot of this is old conversation and you guys are currently wondering why I'm not answering your questions yet. Dylan says, how does your veggie clip stick to the outside of your tank like mine, or mine sticks with the suction cup, drives me mad. This is magnetic, and it's super nice. That's why I like using it. And the outside has like this special coating on it that helps it technically stick to the glass. So if the inside were pulled away, it kind of holds on the glass for a little bit. And this is funny. Okay, this is a true story. I had one of these clips, you know, these feeding clips on my tank, and it was one of the older versions that didn't hold on as well. And Spock pulled off the clip and it went drifting off, but the piece on the outside stayed in place. It held onto the glass. And so I got up and I walked around the corner and I tried to reach in the top of the tank by the overflow box to get it, and it wasn't there. And I was like, oh, I just saw it up there and I'm looking for it. And then I see it's drifted all the way to that end of the tank, to that corner. And I was like, oh. So as I'm standing there getting ready to get up on the stepladder, I watched the current bring the clip to the front and it remagnetized to the outer piece and was back in place. And I was like, I wish I'd filmed that. That's insane. That'll never happen twice. It was so neat. And I had to tell Julian Sprung. I was like, you won't believe what your clip did. It was so funny. Alrighty. Yay! Jermaine says he uses Phosphate RX twice a year and he has 3 yellow tangs and 0 issues. Awoken, pretty cool name, says, what do you use to shield the lighting? I don't have room for a conventional canopy. You're talking about over my tank? That's just a piece of black foam board. It's cheap and it's just a simple, lightweight thing I can throw on there. It's not pretty. Thank God most people don't pay attention to it. But woodwork is, you know, the ideal scenario. Even if it's a 3-sided U shape that you would just like slide it onto the tank and it would create shield on 3 sides. That'd be nice. Matter of fact, I'm building one for a customer this week that he's putting on top of his cube that's rimless. And he's going to set it on top, and I think he's going to apply vinyl to it because it's cheaper than what he wanted to do. And that way he won't have the light spread from his Radeon into his eyes anymore. He'll be trapped within this 3-sided object. He can slide off the tank if he needs to. D-Dot says, how long should I run carbon after I treat with flatworm exit? 15 minutes. Please read the article. I feel like you really need to read the article. Adrian says, my Zoas has started closing up and some haven't opened in 2 to 3 weeks. Other coral that I have are doing great. Well, what kind of corals are those? I dipped the Zoas and no pest came off, just some pods. Phosphates at 0.05, nitrates are 5, alkalinity is 7, pH is 8.2. You might want to go to the store and buy buy a toothbrush that says soft. You know, there's different grades of toothbrushes. Get the one that says soft. You want very, very soft. And then you'll just gently brush the zoanthid, you know, with the bristles to kind of clean it off. You can also take a turkey baster and blow it off, and then try putting it back in the tank and see what happens. You might have a fish in the tank that is nipping at those zoanthids as they've all closed up. For example, if you had a hippo tang, hippo tangs are notorious for chomping down on zoanthids. So maybe that's what's happening. You could also check on your zoanthids late at night and see if they're opening up during the night or if they're staying closed at night as well. And you should check your salinity. If salinity is too high, zoanthids close up. Those are some of the things that come to mind when it comes to zoas being closed. Carl says, I love your coffee mug. Where can I get one? I am sorry, they are completely sold out, and I'm not buying from that company again. So my moderators, or Andrea specifically, said it is her goal in 2020 for me to have mugs again. So we're going to find some other company that actually likes to do business with people to make my mugs, and we'll start shipping those. They'll be in the shop for shipping later this year. MTX Craze says, I run 2 Chinese black boxes, LED fixtures. I have them come on at 6 a.m. when I leave for work so I can feed my fish, and then off at 8 p.m. when I'm back home. Not really having any issues, but it seems like a long light cycle. It definitely is. I almost wonder if you could do a special timer where it comes on, like you said, in the morning so you can feed your fish, and then it just turns off for a few hours, and then starts again at like 1 in the afternoon and runs until like 8 o'clock. Or turns on at 3 in the afternoon and turns off at 9 p.m. or something. That wouldn't do anything weird to your corals. It's not a double light cycle necessarily. It's more like you have that morning thing where you can do your feeding, and then you have your growth period throughout the rest of the day and into the evening. You would need, like a regular, well, a mechanical timer has those little plastic tabs where you can pick to turn things on and off, and then on and off again later in the day. There's digital timers where you can program in multiple sessions. And then, of course, the Apex controller lets you do that. But if you have Chinese black boxes, you probably don't have an Apex. Was that me putting you down? Because that was not what I meant. I'm just guessing. Oh my God, I think I put you down. I apologize. I didn't mean it that way. I meant it in a nice way. But mechanical timers is what I used for many years before I got the Apex, and it works great. And having things turn off and then on again later is ideal. So you could do that. Someone said, no gray goose? Dave Lippy says, how safe are the Nero 5 pumps with anemones? Well, I sell a 3D printed guard that you can put on the back side of the Nero 5, and that keeps everything out of it. So I would say very safe. If you didn't put any kind of a guard, people are reporting they're losing fish on the back of the Nero 5s. I didn't lose any fish to mine, but I did lose a couple of snails. It's like they got on the back to eat it, to clean the algae off the back, that they found. And that was the end of that. I saw those snails there for like 3 days, like, man, you're still in that spot? When I removed it, they were empty shells. Like, oh, that would explain why the shells are there. So the snail guard is awesome. A guy in Canada came up with that. Did a really nice job, and then I offered to sell them for my website, and the rest is history. I've sold a lot of them. Tim says, I have a water change question for you. I know you like to do minimal water changes. Do you ever worry that some other elements you aren't keeping an eye on get depleted and cause issues? No, I don't really worry about it. I mean, it's a thing you could get a little anxious about, but if you're doing ICP tests, they tell you what your numbers are, and the other things we don't measure. And I did, an ICP test last year. I've got a bunch of kits I want to mail that I still haven't gotten around to doing. Haven't got around to mailing in. That when I do, I'll get to see other elements. But Perdibio adds a lot of stuff to my tank. The calcium reactor media has a lot of stuff in the media itself besides calcium carbonate. There's other stuff in there. Matter of fact, I had a guy telling me about magnesium. I'm like, no, it's not in there. And then I flipped over the bag and I was reading the bag and it said it includes magnesium. And I was like, oh, I was wrong. And I took a picture of it. And at the same time, he sent me a huge paragraph of the exact same information he found on a website that stated for a fact it categorically had magnesium in it. And there's other stuff in there too. So some of that replenishes it. Some of the foods I use replenish some of the things that are lacking. There's just so many different things going in the tank that no, it hasn't been a factor. And then the one thing I really was worried about in my ICP test, and I couldn't wait to see the number, was lanthanum. Because I dose phosphate RX so many times a year that I thought, oh, I bet my number is going to be high. And it came out super crazy low. I was like, wow, that's cool. Because, it just made me feel kind of, I don't know, vindicated that, something I like so much isn't doing any harm to my tank, and it works so well, and it's so easy to use. I just love the stuff. But I think in 2020 I'm going to do a water change. I tell you, Tim, I think it's going to happen. Q-Balls Reef says, thinking about adding T5s to supplement my LEDs. How high off the tank do you recommend? 7 inches is the absolute minimum you can put T5s by the water, specifically because of heat that comes off those bulbs. So by raising them up, you get the good spread. You don't pour heat into the tank. When they're closer to the water, you definitely add heat. Some light fixtures have like a glass shield and vents and stuff, and the legs are really short. So it seems like, oh yeah, you can have it closer, but it's really not great. So 7 inches is a recommended height. Fisher Jammin, I don't know who you're talking to, but I don't know the question or the answer to this question because I don't understand the question. If you're talking about the length of the tank, I don't know. Maybe you're talking to somebody else. There's a lot of chat going on in the chat. If your test kit for magnesium, if you're testing for magnesium that's higher than your test kit can measure, you could probably dilute your sample by 50%. You know, like if you need, let's just say you need 10 milliliters of tank water, use 5 milliliters of RODI water and 5 milliliters of tank water and do the measurement, and then double your results. And that'll tell you what your magnesium is. To get magnesium to come down, the simplest way is going to be to water change, and you're going to have to measure the magnesium of the new salt water you're putting in. Because if every bag you put in is high, it'll never come down. And I used to use a brand called Cybon, and it had magnesium of 1600 in every bag, and my tank was 1600 for 3 years straight. I didn't dose 1 drop of magnesium for 3 years because it was already in there, and I couldn't get it to come down. And my snails hated it. It was almost pointless buying snails because they couldn't move because there was too much magnesium in the water. Devin's here, or was. Oh my God, Skip was here. Skip, I don't know if you're still here, but that's awesome. I haven't seen you except occasionally on Facebook. Skip and I are friends from way back on Reef Central, and he was the editor of Reef Keeping magazine, which was a very popular publication and still exists full of great articles you guys should be reading. So nice to hear from you, Skip. I hope you got to hear me reply to you. I'm always about 20 minutes behind the chat when it comes to answering stuff. Camille says, I can't believe I made it twice in 2 weeks. You're doing a good job, Camille. Keep coming to these live streams. Daryl D asked a question. I don't know the answer. My Aussie gold torch I've had for a few months looks like it's deflated. My other hammers and torches are fine. See, that's the hardest part. When people say everything else is fine. Now, why is one thing pissed off in your tank? You know, that's so difficult. Dipping in iodine might not be the solution. How about dipping it in Revive? Revive is a coral cleaner. It's great for LPS corals. Maybe that would be a solution. I don't know if that would be it, but you could try it and it won't hurt your coral. You might just have to leave it alone. You might need to move it to a different spot. Maybe it's in too much flow. Maybe something is irritating it. Maybe a fish is nipping at it. Maybe it's getting too much light. These are, I don't know. Maybe someone else has some input. That's my guess. Glenn says, when reducing phosphates and nitrates, are there wrong combinations with reducing them, like using GFO with NOPOX, algae scrubber with phosphate RX, refugium with GFO, using too many things at once? It's a good question, and it's sort of one of the things I try to do is say choose your battles or pick your battles. Now, I know for a fact that changing water will get rid of nitrate, and the more you change, the faster the nitrate goes away. So there is that. But if you didn't want to do it and you want to just leave your water as is, then using vodka dosing every single day, gradual doses, you could watch the nitrate collapse that way. NOPOX is designed to remove nitrate and phosphate. So you would not run NOPOX with GFO, for example. So what I do in my tank, I usually pick one thing to work on at a time rather than trying to address multiple items. So if 8 parameters are in target range and 1 parameter is out of whack, I'm going to focus on fixing that one. And if another one goes off track, if I can adjust, great. But if I can't, it has to wait till I solve the first problem. And when I was intentionally trying to solve the nitrate problem with the Brightwell brick, and then later with the Red Sea Nopox, and I feel like I did something in between those two. Oh, I did a really intense vodka dosing. That was an epic fail because I was rushing it like a lunatic instead of being smart about it. I was also not changing water because I wanted to see if said product would reduce the nitrate as promised. If we're running Nopox and changing water, well then which is solving it? The water change or the Nopox? So I wanted to watch Nopox work its magic, and didn't work out. I mean, it made a big mess. It was a lot of hassle cleaning out the slime that kept appearing. I contacted Red Sea directly, and the only comment out of everything that ever came back from anyone about Nopox was that I should have had my skimmer running wetter to do a wet skimmate versus probably the way I normally run it, which is, I don't know, it just runs. But I guess I run a little bit on the dry side. It takes a while to collect skimmate, where if I was pulling out a collection cup a day, it probably would have been more effective possibly, but I didn't even know that until months into the Nopox. At that point, I was so fed up with it. I didn't want to put in any more, and I was just doing my best to wean the tank off of it so the tank wouldn't go into shock. And I just dwindled it down until it was done, and I was done. But hooking up the turf scrubber may solve my nitrate thing, and that's the only thing that's wrong on my tank right now. Everything else, all these other numbers are good. So I'm really happy about that, and I'm looking forward to keeping good numbers. All right. Hey, Camille, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate that. And let me find the next question. We've been going for 2 hours and 6 minutes. We're going to have to wrap this up soon. Oh, Malcolm, this one's a tricky one. There was a guy years ago, went by the username The Grim Reefer, and everyone went to The Grim Reefer for the correct bulb combination for T5 usage. That recipe of the perfect bulb collection might exist in Google. So maybe type in T5 bulb configuration, The Grim Reefer, all one word, and see if that comes up possibly. But it's almost like black magic trying to find the right spectrums. But I feel like, well, I don't know the answer. That was the one bulb I really didn't get into. When T5s first hit the market, I tried a couple of all-in-one lights, and it just didn't work out. And I was kind of like, okay, whatever. I got my metal halides, I don't care. And I went to VHOs, and I never looked back. But you're going to probably use like 5 or 6 different colors in your 8-bulb fixture. And I can tell you this, that if you have white bulbs, even one white bulb in there, it'll be toward the back, and you'll have the bluer and the purple ones toward the front, so you're looking through the blue spectrum, even though you have white behind it and other colors. But you're going to want to find somebody that knows that recipe. That is not me. But yeah, it's kind of tricky. You're wanting to find all these perfect bulbs. You'll have a pink one in there, and you'll have blue, and you'll have white, and you'll have purple, and you'll have, I don't know. It's pretty neat, actually, the way those come out. And then you find that sweet one, your tank's like fantastic, and you love it. And the interesting thing about T5 bulbs is your par, when you put the meter in the tank, the number just stays. It doesn't bounce around like it does with LEDs and metal halides. If, let's say, you put the par sensor and it says 170 and you just move it, it just stays 170. It's so creepy. It's like stagnant par. It's the weirdest thing ever. It's a really easy way to measure par because it's not bouncing around. But no, I never use T5s. So I don't have any more advice on that one for you. Sorry. James asks a great question. Can I plumb a fish-only predator tank into a sump that's connected to a mixed reef? I'd love to say yes, but no. The problem is that the predator tank has much worse water parameters, and you're dumping that into your reef's sump water, and the nutrients will be so high, it'll cause some chaos in your mixed reef. Now, if your mixed reef is simple stuff like softies and LPS, and you don't really care, you could probably make it work. You're going to have to stay on top of water testing and see what happens, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to work out in your favor. So that's usually why they're standalone, separate, and not tied in with a reef. MJ Simple Reefer, follow up on the earlier nitrate question. A 30-gallon water change, the nitrates were around 150, and I'm using the ELOS test kit. How are you measuring nitrate with the ELOS test kit? Mine goes to 25. That's the maximum number. That's why I ended up getting the API test kit, which is dirt cheap, but it measures like to 200 or something. And I measured today. I have a picture to show you guys. Let me show off my nitrate. So, there we go. That's today's nitrate measurement. Looks like 40 to me, maybe 35. What do you guys think? 40? 35? Definitely not 20. See? I told you guys, I test my water. I'm on it. All right. TJ Howell, it's not off topic. Everything's on topic. It's a free-for-all of questions and answers. Said, about generators, we use them for power outages as well. And then he said he uses Rec 90 gas. I'm sure that's short for something. Or ethanol-free gas. You won't have to worry about the gas too much. Ethanol-free gas lasts a lot longer. There's a type of gasoline that my tank sitter told me to start using that costs $20 a gallon. And I buy it at Home Depot. And, you know, gas is what, $2 a gallon? But he said it'll never clog up your lawnmower again. And so I've bought a few of those cans begrudgingly. I hate buying it because it's so much money. But every time I pull the rope on my lawnmower, it starts. So he's not wrong, but I'd much rather use regular gas and maybe a stabilizer and just use that. But apparently it gums up the carburetor in the lawnmower. So the high dollar stuff definitely would be a better choice, and maybe that's what the Rec 90 stuff is he's talking about. I only know by what I saw at the store. I didn't memorize the name. I just know what to look for. But running your generator, it's so okay. So let's talk about generators for a second, since we have unlimited time. I'm kidding. When you run a gasoline-powered generator, which is what I have, it's basically a lawnmower engine with a huge gas tank on top. And then, of course, it's got plugs on the side to plug in things. And you plug in the essentials, which the absolute least thing you should be plugging in, not the least thing, the absolute first thing you should plug in would be your return pump. Get the circulation going. You can plug in air pumps. You can later plug in your refrigerator when your lights are off, for example, if you're running lights. There's different things you can do, but tank comes first. When you're done with the generator, don't just turn the switch off. You want to close the valve on the gas line, just like we have a ball valve on our RODI system. You close the line that feeds the gas down into the carburetor, and that way, when that fuel burns down the tubing, it will then be it'll be burned up in the carburetor and gone. If you just turn off the generator, the gas is staying in the line, and it actually can turn to rubber, or turn solid or something. I ruined a generator once that way. And it was because I didn't know to cut the feed line, the fuel line. You cut that fuel line, and then the carburetor will sputter out and finally die, and then it's ready to put away after it's cooled off, obviously. But don't make that mistake. That was a bummer. And I had no idea it would gum up like that inside there, and it clogged up in the tubing. It probably clogged up in the carburetor as well. I took it back to Home Depot and asked them to send it in for repair, and the store manager just told me, no. We're just going to give you a refund, which was amazing because it wasn't brand new. I broke mine, so I went and bought a brand new one that night. And when I came in the next day with the broken one, I explained what was going on, and the store manager was listening, and he says, "No, you're not going to do that." And I said, "No, it's fine. I broke it. I'm just going to go ahead and get it repaired, and I'll sell it to someone in my club used." And they're like, "No, we're just going to give you a store credit toward the one you bought yesterday," which ended up saving me hundreds of dollars. I ended up paying, I think, $80. That was the difference between the used one and the brand new one. which was super nice of him. I was shocked. I guess he sent it in with an RMA, like a store credit, which I did not expect or demand at all. I just wanted to fix it and not send it to a landfill. Rather, someone else could use it. And I figured, what's it going to cost me? $80, $100 to fix it? So be it. And they'll sell it for a couple of $100, and someone else will have a generator to protect their reef. You know, it made sense to me at the time. Zach, quit testing for phosphates out of your RODI system because you're getting a false reading because the water is ion-free. You do not have phosphate coming out of your RODI system. Ah, see, I mentioned Phoenix. Antonio says up there in Phoenix, their TDS can be between 600 and 700 TDS. Wow. Wow, I talked about this stuff like 45 minutes ago. Am I that far behind on the chat? I apologize, guys. Tyler says, I'm upgrading my 6-month-old 90-gallon with a 4 to 5 inch of sand to 108. Oh, with a 4 to 5 inches of sand to 180 gallon. Can I reuse the sand? Do I need to rinse it? Actually, no. 6 months is the cutoff. So if you're going to move from a 90 to a 180, move the sand bed over, and it's still good to go. You don't have to rinse it out and start from scratch. You may have some ugly sediment. That's okay. What I would do is I would drain down as much of the water out of the tank as you can, and then I would take the sand and I would shove it over, you know, like just shove it from one side of the tank all the way across to the big mound, and you have all this hideous brown water. Just ignore that. You know, it'll be, you know, shallow nastiness. You can even pump that out if you want, that detritus-laden water, and scoop out your sand and put it in the new tank because it's only 6 months old, and all the bacteria will be intact in your new tank. And then, you know, the last of the sludge is still in the 90-gallon. It didn't get put into the 180. So I hope that helps. That one's an easy one. You didn't have a hard one for once. Wow, I did not know that. The TDS up in Ontario measures around 550. I did not know that. I feel my pills are wearing off. Let's see. Fred says, I know you added a RAS to your tank. Have you considered screen tops for your tank? No, I haven't. I probably should put one. My cleaner RAS has been good. He's been staying inside the water where he belongs. He's right there. But, you see him? Right. Try to see my finger points. Okay, he just went behind the hammer. Anyway, I haven't. If I were to collect more RASes, I might consider it. I don't know. I don't really like screens. I'm stubborn. Camille asks if I've heard about the Tropic Marin Carbocalcium. It's good for nano and smaller tanks. You can add trace to it as well. So one solution for all except magnesium. So you would need that. Nope, I'm not familiar with it because I don't have a small tank. But I'm glad it's out there for you guys. Todd says, what do you think about dosing no-pox? I'm not a fan. I did it for many months, and it just was more work than good results for me. It didn't play out well for me. Other people love it and get great results. Do you use amino acids? Actually, I just started probably 2 months ago to physically dose. I run Acropora on a dosing pump once a week, and it doses, I think I set it to 70 milliliters a week just to kind of see if anything happens. I can't tell if it does or doesn't, but it seems to be, it's not causing any harm. But that I am dosing that finally. I had a gallon of it sitting here forever. I was like, you know, I should hook that up because I never remember to put it in my tank. So I set it up with a Comor X1 dosing pump. Todd, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate that. Let's see. Cliff tells us that last week he asked about how to reduce aluminum from his system, and after a bunch of research, he found out the most effective method is a combination of ROAFOS and carbon. So there's the answer, guys. If you're trying to get rid of aluminum, ROFOS and carbon will do it. Interesting. If there's a specific recipe, let us know, like the percentages. Elias says, how big is Spock? I don't know. I don't measure her. She hates rulers. It's funny, you put a straight edge near the tank and she swims the other way. I just got an 8-inch blonde, but can't get him to eat. 4th day today. You know, there are times where NASOs will kind of go on a hunger strike for a few days. Hopefully, you'll start to see your fish eating. What you can do if you want as an attempt is take some nori in your fingers and rub it underwater so it breaks up into little pieces going everywhere. And hopefully, it'll blow past your 8-inch blonde NASO and he or she will take a few bites. Maybe that'll help. They get moody and they kind of like refuse to eat for a little bit because of something that bothers them in the tank or something in the environment is irritating them. I remember when I added a bunch of chromis to my tank, Spock went to the corner for like 5 days. And when I put the food in, she didn't care. And I was like, wow. And I was like, what's wrong with you? And then finally, I think she got over it and realized those chromis weren't going anywhere. And so she decided to start swimming around with a group again. Maybe that'll help. Zach says, is cycling tank with live sand shorter than non-live sand? No, actually, using live sand in a cycle is probably not a great idea. I mean, the live sand has bacteria, but I don't know if it can survive the ammonia surge. So I would almost recommend adding the live sand after the cycle is completed so that the bacteria you're putting in doesn't get wasted. I'm going to do some research on that one to make sure I've got that right, but I think I'm right about that. And if I'm wrong, I'll be sure to let you guys know next week. Cordero says, I recently lost some SPS, but everything else is doing just fine. LPS, ZOAs, mushrooms. Well, all those other ones are easy. The SPS are picky, and if your water quality is not dead on, you need to find out what's wrong with it. In my case, I was starting to lose a couple of things this week, and it was because my alkalinity had dropped. So test your water today, see what's going on, and see what's different from what it always is, and hopefully you can isolate the problem and correct it. D-Dot says, I'm looking for a small check valve for my 3/4 inch PVC return line. It has to be small because my tank is close to the wall. Any recommendations? Well, even if you can't find a check valve that's that small, but I think you should. You know what? I would check Marine Depot. They probably have it. But if they don't, if you have to get a 1 inch, for example, you can put reducers to make it go down to 3/4 and now connect your plumbing if you can fit that behind your tank. Tom Francis says, is it possible to drill a tank without removing the inhabitants, the sand, or the live rock? Maybe drain 1/3 of the tank and drill the back glass. I have a 125-gallon tank and I would love to get rid of my hang-on back equipment. You know, it's been done, and when people see it done, they're like, oh my God, he actually did it. It's very unusual to be able to pull that off. When you're drilling a tank, it's normally best that you drill straight down into the glass. And when you're drilling against the glass, you have to keep putting water on it, and you're trying to hold the bit. It's so hard to keep the bit centered and straight and going through and watered and cooled so it won't crack the tank. Invariably, it's always best to just turn the tank on its side and drill straight through. It takes about 5 minutes to penetrate the glass completely, depending on the thickness, maybe longer. And then finally you have a hole. Then you have to do hole number 2. And you finally get it all finished and you're like, okay, that's done. And you install your bulkheads and you install your tank. The other choice would be to get another 125-gallon tank that has the holes drilled in it with overflow boxes and transfer into a new tank. And if your current tank has scratches on the glass, that would be a totally doable upgrade that would make your life better on all fronts. But no, I wouldn't recommend trying to drill straight down, straight through the side of a tank, especially when running, because as you're drilling, when you finally penetrate, some of the stuff could fall in the tank too, which probably isn't harmful, but it's not great either. Fred says, have there been any advances in RODI systems that reduce the amount of wastewater? Yeah, actually, there have been some of the membranes are more efficient. You can change the waste ratio of a RO system with the flow restrictor, but when you do, you end up throwing away more membranes. So there's always a trade-off. Either you waste a little bit more water or you start filling up the landfills. And if you're putting a new membrane in your RO system every year instead of every 5 years, you've put 5 in a landfill. You know, there's that. But there are some out there that purport to work 1-to-1, 1 gallon of good to 1 gallon waste. And those are the ones that are going to replace membranes more frequently. Let's see. And Jay points out, you can run one membrane after the other membrane. And so basically the waste line coming out of the first membrane goes into the second membrane, and that reduces your wastewater significantly, and you produce a little bit more RO water. So you can do that. Thanks for bringing that up, Jay. Simple Aquatic says, how do you keep your zoanthids from extending and keeping them nice and plump? I'm currently running a 29 gallon bio cube, probably, with the Kessel A80. Tuna blues with nothing but softies in it. Try feeding the zoanthids. Find some kind of a food that they like. I mean, I've seen people feed, Reef roids and Bena Reef, and I've also seen people feed pellet food. And the different foods the zoanthids seem to really benefit from. And if your water parameters are spot on and your lighting period isn't too long, your zoanthids should, thrive really nicely in that tank. You might want to run some carbon from time to time too to kind of clarify the water a little bit. And zoanthids like dirty water, so you don't have to worry about pristine systems like we do with the SPS corals. Keith asks a good question. My tank has no skimmer, and I don't have a nutrient problem, but can carbon dosing work without a protein skimmer? Yes, because you're putting bacteria in the tank and you're feeding the bacteria to have more bacteria to consume waste. So let's say your tank has 1 million bacteria, and by carbon dosing you have 1.2 million bacteria. The protein skimmer doesn't really remove bacteria. So yeah, I think it would work. Don't know if you need it, but it's an interesting question. Mark D says, what time you start in the second part? There will be no second part today, people. We need to wrap this up soon. Johan says, I have the Chinese black boxes and the Apex 0 to 10 volt control. The black boxes. Don't put the cheap guys down, Mark. Yeah, you're right. I told you. I'm sorry. Tim B says, do you like oyster stew? I have a delicious and simple recipe. It's fantastic. If you want me to let you know. You mean for me to eat, or is this something for the reef tank? Because I'm not much of a shellfish guy. But thank you very much. I can ship those to you, D-Dot. The guards are very lightweight. I ship a small box up to Canada. Probably will cost you about $14 in shipping. You just have to send me a message on my website. All right, let's see, scrolling down. Well, how do you say that? M. Russell's Reef? Mr. Russell's Reef? Russell's Reef? Russell's Reef. I found black bugs on my monoporas. They are starting to attack some of the acros. Is this the best treatment? Is still interceptor? Actually, I don't know. I don't know what the solution is for black bugs. That's been one of those things that's weird. The fish store by me swore he had black bugs. And I went and looked, and they were like purple flatworms. I was like, those aren't black at all. And they're not bugs. They look like little tiny flatworms. They were very weird looking. Anyway, he He ended up ripping every bit of life out of the tank and had it down to just rock with no tissue of any kind of SPS. You know, he chipped off every bit of life and threw the rock back in the tank with all the fish, and and turned off the lights and let the tank sit for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then he put corals back in, and I think he ended up with them again, and he ripped it down or stripped it down again. So I don't have a solution for you. And I think his nuclear reaction is also not the right way. I think maybe if I was in that scenario, I would think about getting a bunch of itty bitty tiny yellow coarse wrasses. If you can get a bunch of 1-inch wrasses and drop them in and really limit the food that you're putting in the tank so that they are focusing on eating pests, maybe they could devour them. Also remove anything you can and actually remove them mechanically somehow. But thank God I've never had to encounter it. Salty Fresh says, I saw an interesting post on Facebook today. Should you wheel and deal with your local fish store or not? Interested to see what your opinion is on being in the hobby for so long. You know, actually, not only, that's a really cool coincidence, because about 4 days ago, I was thinking about doing a short video, not a live stream, on proper etiquette in an LFS. And I'm sure it won't be super popular, but I feel like it's something we should consider. You know, how we approach our what kind of attitude we have when we walk into a fish store. So that's one I'm kind of working on the script in my mind. You know, what are some of the things I'd like to discuss? I almost would like to possibly do it with Frank, like a back and forth. You know, kind of role play, so to speak. Thought that might be kind of cool. I don't know. It's on my list, but I've got a list of I have multiple videos I haven't done yet. I've got more to come that are needing to do, and I've got something new in the works right now that I have to do a trial run on next week. And then that LFS one came into my mind, and then you asked this question. It's kind of all in that same time period. It's kind of funny coincidence. Matthew says, I just bought myself a pair of the DD glasses. Wow, it's a totally different world in my tank. Wish I'd bought them sooner. Are there better glasses out there? Better than the DD? I'm sure they're all pretty much the same thing. You're talking about the orange gel glasses, right? Like they wear at Aquashella? Lee says, I saw your video on the Nero 5. Are they really that good? Well, I've had mine for 13 months, and I'm very happy with it. True Reef says, I need one of those acclimation boxes you make. Well, True Reef, I will make you the deal of the year, because I have my original one that I made many years ago that I'm selling used at half the price. So if you're interested, I can cut the top piece to make it smaller to fit your tank if you reach out. The other choice is I'll just take that darn thing and I'll take a picture and stick it on the what you see is what you get section of my website, and someone will at some point say they want it. But if you want a brand new shiny one, I can definitely build you one. I've got about 12 people right now I got to build things for, and I've got to build a sump next week. I'm making good progress catching up on stuff. And I know a few of you are still waiting, and I apologize for the delay. And I apologize for my stupid neck interfering with business. So thank you for being kind enough not to rip me a new one. I'm doing the absolute best I can for you guys. But there's days where I just feel like hell. JS says, doesn't Julian Sprung use Revive for flatworms? I don't know. But he sells Revive because he came up with a product. Let's see. Oh, good. MT Craze was not insulted. Thanks. I was trying to be nice. I mean, I get it. We want to save money. Master of Marine, thank you for the super chat. Experienced my first pest challenge and really benefited from your critter ID information as well as super friendly help on Facebook community. Hey, thanks for using our community too. What is your name on there? Be sure to comment in here somewhere so we can notice you more. Yeah, Sunny X was another one that was great at T5s. He had one of the most beautiful minimalistic reef tanks. And did you know that he ended up getting a type of cancer And he shut down all his tanks while he dealt with that, and he's completely beat the cancer. I think he's been cancer-free for like 4 or 5 years now, and he's starting to get the itch to get a tank again. So that'd be really nice. But yeah, he was a great hobbyist, and I'm friends with him on Facebook. So fortunately, I do get to see his posts from time to time if the algorithms play nicely. And yeah, I'd love to see him do a tank again. I would love to see what he could do. And 2, please, Coral Reef says, want to say thank you for the stream with a super chat. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. All right. Yvonne says, I know this isn't about lighting. That's fine. I have a 200-gallon Red Sea XLL 750, and I want to add different species of tangs. Any suggestions on how to add them to my tank? Well, it's a 200-gallon tank. I would say you can have 4 tangs in that tank. If you wanted little itty-bitty tiny ones, you could have more. But they will outgrow the tank, and you'll have too many. But if you're thinking of a normal-sized tank, I would say you should maximize at 4 in the tank, the 4 different species, whether it's 4 of the same species or 4 different species. In other words, 4 different body shapes versus 4 of the same. But like some people like a harem of hippo tangs, or they want to have a splash of yellow tangs, or they want to have a purple tang and a dulcimeri and a unicorn tang, and maybe a coal tang. Those are 4 different species. But the unicorn tang gets immense, so that probably wouldn't be good in a 200-gallon tank. I would try to find tangs that are smaller in body size. So I wouldn't look for a NASA tank for a 200-gallon tank, for example. But if you're going to do a 200-gallon tank now for like the next 2 or 3 years, but you're going to be doing a 400-gallon tank in a few years, you could get some of the tanks you want now that will end up going into the bigger tank later. William says, my sulfur reactor has my nitrates down to 1 ppm. Don't you hate it when somebody shows off like that? That's awesome. If I speed up the flow, will it decrease the anaerobic bacteria and allow the nitrates to go up? Thanks in advance. I think that's exactly what it would do. I think you increase the flow, so more water is going in and going out, and it doesn't have as much contact time. I think you're right. A friend of mine named Matt Dudley out of Florida, he has something similar to what you're doing. His is a, not sulfur, it's a, it's ugly. It's got methanol in it, and he's doing a methanol reactor, and it's just hideous. It's so gross. You can't, like, what is that? It looks so bad, but it keeps his nitrate down. He has like 60 anthias in his tank. It's awesome. So if you increase the flow through it, yes, your nitrates shouldn't be, the nitrate reduction shouldn't be as effective, and you should see it come up slightly. Are you going to try to aim for like 5? Gideon asks me the question, why don't you use a propane generator or dual fuel? I live in an area that's electricity only. So if I were to do, so I can't have a natural gas, for example, on a generator. If I want to do a propane generator, I would need to get one of those big propane tanks that sits in your backyard that the truck drives up and runs a long hose and refills it occasionally. I kind of don't want one of those in my yard. But I really am leaning more and more toward getting a whole house generator. I don't know if it'll happen this year, but I would kind of like to get one. I need to do other things. I have way more bigger priorities in my house right now. I need a new roof. I'd like to replace my stove. I want to buy an iPad Pro this year. These are not all mutually exclusive items, but they're all on my hit list of things I want to get. So, yeah. Zach says, why am I getting PO4 with my freshly mixed salt water? Oh, so you were saying you found phosphate in your DI water before, I believe. I don't know why you're seeing it in your freshly mixed water. I would mix up another batch and check again. And I would check it with multiple kits, not just with like the Hannah checker. And I would find out if there's something that's being misinterpreted or tested wrongly. But I did the same thing. I have a huge blog about this exact topic, and it turns out you can't measure it in RODI water. Tim's Aquarium House just said he realized he didn't say hi to everyone. Hi, Tim. Everyone think like a group voice. Hi, Tim. Jay says, a strange question, I've never looked into it. Does anyone change the flow restrictor? Is it necessary, and how often? I never have, and it's been years. Whenever you replace the membrane, you replace the flow restrictor at the exact same time. And every membrane I sell from my website comes with a flow restrictor, so you can do that as soon as you receive it. Kevin says, I stopped using Nopox because it was causing slime in the sump, and now I have some kind of red algae on my sand. Nitrates are 0, phosphates 0.4. Red Cyano-RX had no effect. Any idea what it is? It could be a very stubborn strain of cyanobacteria fueled by the residuals of Nopox. And you might take a double dose of Red Cyano-RX or even a triple dose. I would do a double before I jump to a triple. Or I would dose, basically, turn off your protein skimmer, turn off your UV, turn off your carbon reactor or remove carbon from the system, put in the Red Cyano-RX, wait 3 days. If it's not gone, treat the tank again with more Red Cyano-RX. Wait 2 more days. If it's not gone, treat again 1 more time. And hopefully after a couple more days, it's just gone. It could be super stubborn and takes multiple treatments. After all of those treatments, then do a ginormous water change and pull out the, go ahead and start running the carbon again and turn on your protein skimmer. And have a bunch of salt water ready as well because your protein skimmer is going to overflow a lot. Drain all that into a bucket. And once it's all completely drained, then you can reset the system, and your the skimmer will no longer drain, and you can get everything leveled out. Someone just came to my front door. I'll be right back. Hold on to your ears. So Kevin and his wife are here, and so I have to wrap up this live stream because now they want my full attention. Actually, he came by to pick up an order. He says, surely you'll be done with the stream by now. But, you know, he doesn't know me very well, does he? All right, let's, one last question, and then we're going to be done. Scrolling. I'm probably missing 90 questions now. We'll do Jordan's. He's setting up a 500-gallon tank and wants to know how to do the flow in his new system. It's an island tank, which means that you're going to see it from 4 different sides. You might have to put the overflow box in the dead center, like a tower overflow, and possibly connect gyre pumps on the tower overflow pointing 4 different directions. Another option would be to do a closed loop through the bottom, which I always am terrified of, but you drill holes. You put in Schedule 80 bulkheads that are really strong, and you would have water draining down into pumps, you know, external pumps, that then push in water through those nozzles that are coming through the substrate. And that would be a way to have flow in the tank without looking at power heads and not having power heads up on the viewing sides of a tank that is essentially an island in the middle of a room. The other choice would be to do some kind of closed loop that draws water from the middle of the tank somehow, and then returns it through a lot of nozzles along the top, but then you're going to see like 8 or 10 outputs along the top, which may not look good either. It's kind of a challenge. And a last one that comes to mind, they had kind of a cool idea where they took like a large PVC fitting that was like 5 or 6 inches in diameter, and they siliconed it to the bottom of the tank, and then they filled sand around it, but there was this round hole, and they put a Vortex on the bottom and the wet side inside, and it shot water straight up invisibly. And then you arrange your rock work accordingly, and you try to keep the sand out of that spot. So those are some ideas that come to mind. But I'm just going to stop here, guys. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Please do test your water like I always tell you to. And I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you guys next Saturday at 2 o'clock. Bye.